Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religions. And some folks I haven't seen in a minute. Puffalopagus, how are you? Not often able to come on stream because of working. Peace and respect, William Freeman, Willie Ignorant, and of course, What the Back. Alright, guys. Oh, geez, it would have helped if I'd have adjusted my fade. Here we go. Sorry about that, guys. And for now, until I hear some boop in the background, meaning someone came into the stream, link is at the top of the side chat. A little bit of bibliography. And those born of that generation, of the name of conspicuous position, again, the name of conspicuous position, also Shem, also Hashem, meaning a godlike character, in this case, the Christ Jesus. And he of the name of conspicuous position was God elected to change alive, family building block sons delivered to him. Of course, this always includes daughters as well. And he cursed the breast a second time alive to have some tarry after the flowing deluge. That means flowing deluge, angels coming to the earth. Tarry meaning spend more time or waiting. And those cursed of the breast is those who don't accept heaven right away. So they're having trouble adjusting. Doesn't mean that they're damned. Just means they're having a problem. Declare the name of distinct and conspicuous position, and you declare life continued. After the travailing of those whom he cursed the breast of, for a graceful God elected, changed and quickened life for you, and will bear and build again sons and strangers, and bear and build again daughters and strangers from your village, and are the apple of your eye. So how can someone be both a stranger and your own child and the apple of your eye? It's because those in heaven birth the first set of people, I would say ethnic groups. So they're literally their children, and they're placed on the next earth. And he who cursed the breast declared that those of the grace of God elected will be changed and quickened alive. There's the promise of physical perfection in heaven. And did have travail, that means trouble on the earth, and have been sent out sprouts who went forth. That is, they were separated from heaven, now they're not. And he who cursed the breast declared that after that tribulation, the sent out sprouts will create the next God-elect creation in a harmonious effort and change alive future sons and daughters. There you go. They too will be ascended into heaven, but they will be created by those people off of the last earth, and so the cycle of life continues. And sent out sprouts will also be changed and quickened alive, and they're called by God rebirth, of passing through into the region beyond. I guess I just said that. Sorry. Jumped ahead a little bit. And it is here shown that quickened sent out sprouts will show after the manner of work of the region beyond. In other words, it'll be apparent that they were changed. In creating by God's elected, that creation will be in harmony to again obtain sons and daughters. That is, earth starts out peaceful. Each earth starts out peaceful, I should say. Peace and respect. Maynard saves. Nothing compares to you. Our quickened alive creations of God elect calling will be changed to live eternally of those who were born into that dividing stream. So there we go with the dividing stream again. Heaven and earth. The region beyond quickened them alive after being born into a dividing stream, and of the creation and God's elect and called years, and they too begat sons and daughters. I'm starting to see a pattern here. And of the dividing stream, some were quickened alive, and called, and changed, to live old, and they begat a shepherd husband friend. Again, another name for Christ. There's like, I don't know, so many names for Jesus in this. Peace and respect 420. And from the dividing stream were quickened alive those following, and were reborn of the shepherd husband friend of unity, and God's elect of transitioning, and in that year were begat sons and daughters. Yes, they'll be having kids all the way up into end times. And the quickened alive shepherd husband friend lived a unity of calling life, and begat a wreathed branch of the vine. Wonder what that's going to mean. 3 days left. Until what? Peace and respect, 3 days left.
Hey, I'm cosmological argument that I
Yes,
entered
you
here
are.
before. Yeah,
Yes, you are.
by my
I
profile
recognize your
picture.
voice and the symbol.
Yeah. Okay, but
How
how
are
are you
you?
doing? I'm doing
I'm,
much better than before. Like, thank God. Like, I took
oh,
medications and they started to work a little bit just, but I'm still like, I'm not totally okay. Like, if you, but I'm better than before. Thank God.
I'm very glad for you. I hope everyone else feels the same way in your life. You know that
Thank
they're
you.
happy for you. Yeah, right
Okay,
on.
yo, demolish. Well, when I talk to people about God, they keep saying like, how do you know atheists? They keep say or they keep saying like, how do you know if it's like not a unicorn who created the universe? Like, but yeah, but I told him that do you believe that a unicorn would be would be possible like to create the universe? Like, would be a unicorn is not intelligible. Like, if you get what I mean.
Um,
So
I
how would
would
you
say
respond to
that
it?
there's a certain amount of intellect necessary in complex creation. Sure.
Yeah. But how do you respond? Like they keep saying like it could be aliens, it could be like how do you respond to this?
Well, first I grant anything that's logically possible, right?
Yeah.
Because you have
But
to, because it's logically possible.
no,
Okay.
but not possible. There has to be one thing I think, and there could be lots of contradictions in one of the possibilities.
I wasn't done. And
I'm
and
sorry.
then I start looking at whether or not their assertion makes sense in
Yeah.
reality from what we know about these things. For instance, some people are pantheists or panentheists, or they are panpsychists, where they believe that their God is immaterial or material constructs, material objects. And then I
Yeah.
have to ask them things like, well, do they have consciousness? And they're like, well, we have
Yeah.
consciousness. I would say, well, don't you at least have some standard for your God that at least be conscious at some level? You know? And I'll work them down like that until it ends up that they are their own God. That's what it ends up being when people say
Okay.
things like that. And with things like with unicorns or magic,
Yeah.
universe farting fairies or whatever like that, just get them to come to where they end up denying it by looking at the unlikelihood of it and how silly the
Okay.
claim is.
Yeah. Okay, but we when I told him that we are smart, so God must have a power for giving us this quality or feature of being smart. He told us that we are like we're dumb. Like he told that we're dumb. Like, does it mean he's dumb as well or what?
Yeah, I guess they could assert that, but I wouldn't accept it, right?
Yeah, but it has to be not true because
I tell you what,
because
a question I
it's
like
not
to ask
necessarily
people is, go ahead, sorry.
yeah it's not necessarily that God has to be dumb because we have like a feature of dumbness. Like if he's intellect, if he could like give us these things. But I think I think there's like we have an innate thing for belief in God. Like we have an innate thing for knowledge for God. Like yeah.
Something I like to ask people in a situation like that is what's their minimalistic God? What's the least they would accept as a God? Usually they're going to
Yeah.
defeat their own arguments in the statement. Peace and respect, Johnster Monster. Because you're going to say, well, what's the minimum you would accept as a God? And they're not going to say, rainbow farting pixies. They're not going to say that. So it gets rid of a lot of the silliness, so you don't have to put up with that. Have you recently had some conversation that went like that? Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
yeah. I just just a few minutes ago on Discord because I use Discord a lot.
Okay.
I
Well, it would also help them if you're willing to give a definition of God. So, be prepared to do that as
But
well.
they keep saying it's assumptions, like we cannot infer it. Like I talk about inferring it, but they say it's an assumption.
Have you ever looked at the argument from necessary and contingent beings?
No,
Do you know
but
about that?
I hear about contingency argument, but I don't know if this is it.
Well, the contingency argument would answer their challenge and make their challenge look pretty silly, actually.
Yeah.
So I'd spend a couple hours on contingency
So
if it
I
helped
mean,
you, with those arguments.
okay, like should I like read books or like search for books?
Well, the level of argumentation that we're having here online is so brief and of very very little depth that normally you can do well in an argument from a 2 hour or 3 hour study of a certain certain set of arguments. You can do pretty well just from a short study. So I mean, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
okay.
invest money in it when everything's online for free. Peace and respect, Rage. How's it going, brother?
Okay, but they're saying that it's impossible for us to know whether God exists or not. Could that be true or not?
Well, it depends on your definition of God, which is why I said you should give your definition of God.
Okay, but should we?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I want. Yeah. Okay.
My definition of God is biblically adherent. That means it's strictly from the text with no
Um,
assumptions. And I've never had someone say, "Well, your God doesn't exist." I'll Bob.
okay.
Peace and respect,
Okay, but
Sammy.
Hello.
yeah, but
Carry
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah. But I don't understand. Like you say, definition. Like, is it stupid to define God like definition means like something does not exist and we just define it conceptually, like right or not?
Well, something being conceptual
Robbie.
doesn't make it non-existent. Maths are conceptual,
Okay, but
but based in reality, and they're very, very useful. So, I mean, it depends on your
Mm.
definition of God.
The
so we
idea of
define it.
existence itself is conceptual.
Yeah, when you get down to the nitty gritty, yes.
Mm.
Although we normally grant those
And yet,
precepts, those
yeah,
axioms. Yeah, just so we don't
But
end up
how is it?
talking about solipsism all night. What's that?
Yeah,
3 days?
how is the idea? Yeah, how
Your
is
your
the idea
microphone
of?
kind of is cutting in and out, so try to be steady, okay?
Okay,
And you were saying?
g'day, Rage. Good to see
I,
you,
I think
brother.
Hey, what's up, y'all?
peace and respect, and Knock and Mark, and how you doing, guys? I think the
Hey,
gentleman
how you
has
doing?
muted himself by accident. I want to give him a chance to realize he's
Yeah.
muted on StreamYard.
yeah, I
Okay.
know.
You-
Yeah, I was doing something. Sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. So be prepared for those kinds of arguments if you're going into those kinds of rooms. Is basically what I'm saying. And if you have a definition of God that makes sense in reality, that wouldn't hurt anything.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
I kind of tuned in when you were talking contingency argument, and
Yeah.
I don't know, like philosophical arguments for God is like to me is like, all right, so like you need like thought experiments to prove your God to yourself. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, I think it's good as an elimination process. Let's say someone made a claim and it can't be so in reality. That doesn't prove that what they're asserting is true, but I can certainly prove that something isn't possible.
You mean logically possible?
Yeah, like logically impossible. Some of the claims that I hear,
I don't know. It
and
just seems
that's
like it takes like 150 arguments for you to finally get to like a specific creator. Like, because I'll have a conversation about the Kalam, and I'll point out, well, this doesn't. This indicates like a creator of the universe, and you kind of have to infer that creator there within the argument
The
to even
original
really make it
Kalam
work.
doesn't.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
original Kalam doesn't. The
But then
Kalam
they'll go, well,
basically-
you need contingency argument for that. And I'm like, contingency argument is just basically making an argument about how human beings are dependent. So they must be dependent upon a creator God. So you're inferring dependence. It's all like just thought experiment nonsense to make sense of what doesn't make sense.
Well,
What's wrong
yeah,
with that?
I sorry, go ahead, Bob.
No, I just say what's wrong with that? Like, can we like reach the truth with our intellect?
I would hope
Like-
people would just look at reality and make conclusions.
There's
Yeah.
some things that we have to make, arguments from inference, and there's some things that can be made deductively, and I think the reason we have the structures that we have for arguments is because you can't always evidentially show everything. Not everything works that way. Not everything fits under a microscope. So the question is it solid? Did you get it reviewed by people who know what they're talking about? Are your premises solid and true, and does your conclusion follow? And his connection finally died.
Well, that's a logical argument. I think there's very little you can actually argue from a sort of purely ideal sort of just as purely cognitive way. I think there's very, very little you can disprove a lot sort of in a cognitive way. You can sort of say, hey, married bachelors can't exist. Like those two things are sort of mutually exclusive, or you can sort of argue against things pretty easily, sort of exclude them. But just because something's logically possible, like possible in logic, doesn't mean it actually exists. Right. So even though, you can logically say, hey, you can make all kinds of logical arguments about why magic doesn't violate any kind of logical rules kind of thing, and then sort of say, well, that doesn't mean it exists. It just means that it's logically possible. Sure. So I think the one thing that I can sort of rationalize, and that's the word I was thinking for earlier, rationalize concretely is that a reality has to exist. But beyond that, I think that you're sort of getting into the space of, okay, all these things are logically possible. There's no logical reason why they can't exist, no logical reason, but that says nothing about their actuality and reality.
Right. Yeah, that's why I say it's an elimination process, and you should do everything you can to eliminate a possibility, and that's only one way. There's lots of other things that I think should be done.
Yeah. But it's the precepts that get me, that sort of have absolutely no foundation for what they base it on. They just sort of say, hey, well, I'm going to assume a God first off, and then that's the entire argument as far as I'm concerned. Like that's it. That's the most terrible argument I've ever heard in my entire life, because you could do that with literally anything. You could do that with fairies or aliens or anything you want. Well, if I'm going to assume it exists in the first place, I'm going to presuppose that aliens are necessary for morality, and then that's my evidence. Morality exists, therefore aliens. What's that called? That's affirming the consequent, basically.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so if you presuppose something leads to something else, and because that something is there, then your assumption was right in the first place. It is the worst argument I've ever heard in my entire life. It's terrible. But, that's just my opinion.
That's also correlating things that aren't necessarily attached to, isn't it?
What do you mean? Correlating things that aren't necessary.
Like, why is it that morality is attached to space fairies?
Okay, so presuppositions are a weird one, because you've got to presuppose some things. Everybody does it, right?
Sure.
Everybody does it. And the reason why you have to do it is because, like, for instance, how do you know your senses are real? And this is into solipsism again, which you really didn't want to go into, but you've got to sort of presuppose that ahead of time in order to use them to get information about the world, to even assume you're not a brain in a vat or whatever. That you've got to presuppose something's there. There's problems with induction. How do we know that induction works? Well, it's because it keeps working. That evaluation that it keeps working, so it'll work into the future, is induction. So there's a circular argument there. It has circularity.
Yes.
So you've got to do some presuppositions up front.
Got to say,
The
I never
thing
thought
is-
about it, but you're obviously right. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with induction. That's basically it. That induction is used to prove induction, basically. So, and so somewhere along the line, you've got to presuppose something, that something works in order to use it to justify itself, kind of thing. So, the whole point about presuppositions is they should be done tentatively. They should be done only when necessary, absolutely necessary.
Assuming as
And-
little as possible. Yeah.
Assuming as little as possible, and keeping in mind that there is always the possibility that they are incorrect. That is a possibility.
The first thing that
Sorry.
popped into my head when he said or asked the question about what we can attain just with our, how did he put it, with our knowledge or with our
Right.
ability. The
Yeah,
issue,
rationally,
the biggest thing that
Mm.
pops straight up for me is the things that
Mhm.
we've discovered in reality that are completely counterintuitive. And that's the problem with just trying to use our knowledge, is we will inadvertently use our intuition. And so many things are counterintuitive once you
Yeah.
find out that your brain's not going to go there.
Yeah, and that's why. No, I totally agree, Bob. And that whole idea of some people saying, "Oh, well, it's common sense," and it's like, yeah, but so many common sense things are in fact wrong.
Yeah.
Like we get this idea that our intuition is reliable, that we depend on it, and for some things we do depend on it. You know, you may sort of rely on your intuition for your feelings about what you feel when you meet somebody, or whether the situation is dangerous or not, kind of thing. But it's not. It doesn't have the reliability of sort of a methodology that has some sort of inferential justification. It's just that gut reaction. There's nothing to base it on. So, yeah, no, I totally agree with Bob. Your intuition is a terrible way to evaluate reality. Because yeah, it's sometimes right, but it's often wrong, and as Bob said, it's counterintuitive. Things seem
I would be
ridiculous. and they
interested in
turn out
hearing
true.
what each of you have to say about Harple Blue's question here.
Well, first I was going to ask Nock. I thought you hated this philosophy stuff, Nock. I thought you hated this stuff.
I hate that people use it, and they use it in different ways. Like, so, you know, expanding your knowledge, trying to understand your true justified belief, I think is necessary, and I wish more people would actually try to do that. But
Yeah.
like trying to justify just bullshit, and it seems to me like you can justify almost anything utilizing philosophy if you want to. Like you can literally argue yourself into this complete nihilistic position to where it's like, I don't know, it doesn't seem very healthy to me. You know, so yeah,
Okay.
I do have this issue with philosophy, but on this channel about a year and a half ago, Khalil Allah painted me into a corner, a pretty bad one. So I've dedicated myself into learning philosophy, and I've come a long way. I still got a long way to go, though. You know.
Look, I just dabble myself. You know, I just give my opinions on it, and I just dabble in philosophy. I'm not an expert. I'll fully acknowledge that. You know, so
I think a lot of people use it as like this beating brow tool. Like let me, you know, a lot of them aren't even that smart. They'll just go on like Clubhouse and copy down what people say for like an hour and a half, and then go around and pretend like they're smart and try to beat people up. And you know, I just like simpler conversations. Like, let's talk about your theology and why you think your theology makes sense, and don't give me the law of excluded middle. No, let's talk some real talk.
But
so
no,
I-
those
you know,
were philosophical questions.
I know when I say
They are.
when I say fuck philosophy, I'm making a philosophical statement. You know, so,
Yes, you are.
Sorry, what's the question that he had? He said, "Why do people want to believe in God?" Kind of
And I
thing.
suppose
Like,
that was something like that. Yeah.
what reasons do people have for wanting to believe in God? I think it's a myriad of reasons. I think that in some way we all want to find a sort of something fundamental about our reality. We all want to know how we got here, how the universe got here. Why are we here? That's essentially what people are after. Um, as much as I hate to admit it, God gives a very simplistic and very easy to understand way to say, why are we here? I don't think it's the correct answer. I think that people believe in an answer that's not necessarily correct because they want an easy answer to solve this massive looming problem. Um, and that's fair enough. They think that's the answer. I personally would completely disagree, but I think it is that yearning to know exactly what the hell we're doing here. Like, why are we conscious instead of not conscious? Why are we sort of where are we headed? What are we doing? Why should we be doing it? It solves moral questions as well. It solves what's good and what's bad. You know, um, I prefer to do the hard work. I prefer to actually not believe in something that's just the easy answer because it solves the question. I want to know the actual truth, not just something that somebody tells me from a pulpit. And then I'm overgeneralizing, but sort of I dislike the way it's sort of given as the answer to any question you can possibly have. And if it's given as the answer to any question, even ones that we can't investigate, right? We can't investigate how the universe came about. We're only beginning down that road. If you stop at God, then you're never going to actually find out what happened because you have no interest in sort of, actually investigating what happened. Where did we come from? Why are we here? So, yeah, that's my spiel.
well, yeah, I tend to agree with Mark. Mostly, I think that everything that Mark said was true, especially like in our ancient past. I think when man was primitive and we were trying to explain a lot of things, we used our imaginations to do so. And I think over a period of time, we utilize these God concepts to build civilizations, to bring people together, to rule people once we had people together. And I think most people now today, though, are just born into it. And I think that once you're indoctrinated as a child, it's really hard to change your worldview, especially when, things happen that you can't explain on the spot. Like even as an atheist, I still have so many times where you're just sitting in the house, you're by yourself, and you have that creak. And you're like, oh, somebody's in the house, and you go and you check, nobody's there, and so your mind will fill in the blanks of all that childhood indoctrination that you had your entire life, and you say, well, demons, angels, spirits, and in actuality, it's the wind moves, the earth moves, the house moves, right? So it's I think everything that Mark said is spot on, but you mix that like just thousands of years of domineering childhood indoctrination into it, and you have something so ingrained into the human DNA that it's going to probably take thousands of years to get away from it.
Yeah, no,
When
So
you-
my
Mark-
answer would
Mark, when you said a simple answer, the first thing that ran through my head when you said that is I thought people's apologetics for God is not simple. But then I thought, how simple could you possibly make it? And I guess sufficient power, intent, and magic, I suppose, to pull it off. I guess if you just looked at it in those three. Go ahead, Sammy.
That's right. So when I put my Christian hat back on, well, firstly, before I put my Christian hat back on, I think to touch on what Knox said, I believe the idea that a lot of scholars have that evolutionary, we have always had the choice, right, to see the bush rustling and go, could be the wind, right? Could be something else that we don't know that could threaten us or eat us. So we will just assume it's the thing that's going to eat us because that's the safest assumption. That over thousands of years develops into creating things to answer things we don't have answers for. So we hear the creak, instead of going, houses creak, our brain's looking for that what's going to harm us thing. And in this modern day, we don't have animals hunting us down. We have this indoctrination of demons or, you know, ghosts and bullshit like that. So that's how I think it's sort of developed. But why do people still need God or want God? For me, it was partly like Mark was saying about answering the meaning of life and all these things that don't seem to make sense to someone that's aware. But the biggest part for me, you've got an echo there, Fritos.
I shut him off.
Was my fear of mortality. I needed this idea that I wasn't going to die, that this shitty life that we live in, that I was programmed to think was so evil and broken and sinful and horrid and miserable, couldn't be all there is. Surely, you know, all of the loved ones I've lost, I'm going to, you know, that wanting to see them again, you not wanting to die, not being able to deal with our own mortality, all of that is answered and solved by God. For me, it's like a Santa Claus for adults.
So it
Ariel.
is that idea that suffering is pointless kind of thing. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Ariel, the question was, why do you think that people need God?
I mean, so I'm definitely going to have a different answer because, like, while I'm still like a skeptic and like, to me, like, I don't need what I believe to be existentially real for me to believe it, because to me it's symbolic. Given, like, I have a very heterodox view, you know, relative to Judaism, but I do think that a big element of it is this level of comfort, and it's kind of like, can you have that comfort without, you know, without letting it basically take over your logical mind? And I think that the answer is yes, but it's so easy for that to become corrupted. And I think you could argue it's inevitable that it does, as, you know, with each successive generation. It's kind of like the, you know, infinite monkey theorem. If, you know, with enough time, anything can happen. And when you're dealing with power, it will happen.
That was a good answer.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know. Will symbols always become corrupted? So if you're just looking as a, you know, at it as a symbolic thing, like a lot of pantheists kind of do this. They sort of see the universe as God, but basically with no supernatural or mental properties or anything like that. It's more just God's the universe, the God of Spinoza kind of thing, which is sort of physics. But I do have to agree with Ariel that idea of it's just symbolic often does corrupt, and it sort of brings up, will people actually worship the flying spaghetti monster in the future? For instance, I've often thought about that. You know, will that be passed down sort of, you know, as this parody, and then people end up believing in the parody? Because that's happened before. People have done parodies of things and they end up believing in the parody. So, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting point, Ariel.
You know, you bring up Spinoza's God, and I just really started looking at it, but it is the thing that I'm looking at next. Like, is this the God that the raging atheist can believe in? So,
yeah.
Well,
Well,
Serb nearly got you there the other night, Rage. That was funny.
who did?
Serb.
Oh yeah, Cerberus sex is a pain in my ass. Has been for about 2.5 years.
Now, wait a
From
minute,
what
it's
I've
not
heard-
just you. He does that to everybody.
yeah, I've heard
me
that, yes,
especially.
yeah.
No, we go way back. So I met Cerberus Hex. It was this long story. So I was hanging around with a bunch of pagans, Ocean Keltoi, a bunch of pagans, and John Peterson had on these two scholars that were talking They were heathenism, especially like Norse mythology or Nordic mythology or whatever. And they got into historical parts of that relating to World War II, the tie between that and the Nazis at the time, which is all historical. It all happened, and the pagans lost their damn minds, right? So they asked me, because they were pagan and they were woke scold and they didn't like it, it hurt their feelings, and they asked me to take it down, and I did. For the time being, because I was dealing with Ocean Keltoy, who had his hands in a lot of big atheist channels at the time. I really wanted to find the history out for myself, so I took it down temporarily, and it led to this big blow up with John. Well, John was in this room bitching to Cerberus Hex and this other guy. So Cerberus Hex starts trolling the hell out of me and the pagans, and especially this one pagan trans person named Callan. And it became this Callan's Raging Boner meme, and it became this all-out war. He brought in allies, and it was this big clusterfuck of bigotry. So yeah, that's how I met Cerberus Hex, and ever since then, it's been this. Sometimes we really can get along, and then other times it's just like, yeah, screw you, I hate you to death.
No, okay. So you got a frenemy out there, do you know? That's awesome.
It's one of those, yeah.
So paganism. So pagan just used to describe somebody who is non-Christian. That's all. Like that's the thing.
This was specifically heathenry. So like Norse mythology, Thor, Odin, all of that.
Yeah, but that's Germanic religion rather than.
Yeah. And it all tied into. Well, and it was particularly those pagans, but this was a huge community of pagans. So it was so many different ones. You had Celtics. You had people with Greek pantheons, some atheo pagans, but there was a big beef in the clique with that. I mean, it was this huge, but everything that they all pretty much all had in common was like it was a completely woke scold shit, and they were trying to word police, and it became this big thing on my Discord server. I shut down my Discord server. It became a big mess. This huge blow up. I don't talk to Sirs or Ocean or any of them anymore.
Right. I mean, the whole thing about Hitler was an atheist, that is patently not true.
Yeah, it's not true.
However, people sort of go, oh, but he was a Christian, and I don't think that's true either. I think J.L. Warren did a really good video on this recently.
He used Christians, but he wasn't a Christian.
I mean, at the end of the day, and I think this is an important point, does it actually matter what you are versus what you use to control people?
Well, I think that I think the argument that because he was a X, then that means X is bad is a terrible argument to begin with.
Of course.
But it's really that idea of what is actually factually true. What did this man actually believe? And when you sort of do a deep dive on the history, it's kind of, he had a mix of all kind of weird and wacky beliefs.
That was the impression I always had.
Yeah,
I have a question for everyone in that regard when you make your point, Mark.
Yeah, it was kind of a mix of Germanic and sort of divine, this weird ass divine sort of centered around himself religion. He saw himself as a Jesus character. That doesn't mean he was Christian. He hated the Christians. He thought they were terrible, but that doesn't make him an atheist. He definitely had some belief in a god, but it wasn't the Christian god. Well, it was more like a mix.
He grew up Catholic. He utilized the Protestants. Yeah. He got the three major Protestant leaders in Germany to follow him. But yeah, he definitely had plans to persecute the Christians, just like he was doing against the Jews. Had he won the wars on a couple fronts, he probably would have started pursuing that goal. He was an occult personality. He was chasing the spear of destiny. I think that's been well documented. Yeah. He believed in ufology, and he believed in himself. Like as Mark was saying, is this like godlike type figure. Christians want to portray him as an atheist because he did have that Catholic background, that Christian background. He did placate the Christians and utilize the Christians within Germany to pretty much cement his power within Germany. So they feel like almost like they have to, because they feel like they're responsible. But They're not. I mean, the man was a madman. He was insane, and he wanted power, and he was addicted to power, and he was willing to pretty much do anything to get power and keep it. So,
I don't think so. I think it's that sort of idea that they want to say atheism is bad because look at, like, they want to say every single, horrible person of the 20th century was an atheist, because there's no doubt Stalin was an atheist. Like,
I was just going to bring up Stalin and Mao. They do the same thing with Stalin and Mao.
Right.
When there's power dynamics and there's government dynamics involved, there's superiority complexes. It has really nothing, like their atrocities really have nothing to do with communities of atheism, as most of the people that they were persecuting were atheists.
So
Yes.
I actually wrote a paper on this, it's almost 2 years now. But like when I was looking for sources for this, I discovered something that just completely blew my mind, because frankly, the only person I'd ever heard this from was a fundamentalist before, so I never took it seriously. But basically, yeah, Hitler was heavily involved into this German, basically the Ariosophist movement, which was a shoot off of Theosophy, where you already had this idea of like this, these different root races and the Aryan race, but the idea that the Germans were specifically descended from them, as opposed to like just some mythic race in the past, that was a very that was, I think,
it's a common theme of eugenics, and eugenics was a big thing around then. They utilized it, essentially this race is the superior race, and usually it's your race.
So, Ariel, I want to ask the question from just what you said before we get too far off it.
Also, just before I forget this, though, one thing that's important to mention, though, is they were trying to portray Jesus as an Aryan. So what they were doing, they were trying to shift away the power from Christianity into their own, national church. But what they wanted to do was basically portray Jesus in a very Gnostic way as Lucifer, who was going against the Jewish God, who was being understood as the devil.
Yep.
So it's not
because he liked
that
that Jesus was against the Jews, right? He liked that about him, that he saw Jesus as causing the downfall of the Jews, and that was a good thing. And go ahead, Ariel. I'm sorry.
Basically just that this understanding of like that he was against Christianity. No, he was against the Judaism that he saw in Christianity. He wanted to basically exercise it out in order to, because there would have been no way to go to war with all the Christians. It's all about subverting them and co-opting them. And you can see that happening in America now. Like literally, there are, evangelicals who are working together with like far-right ethno-nationalists that are also involved in the occult, despite the fact it goes against everything they believe in.
Yeah, I won't argue with that.
Peace and respect, Leo. Welcome to the chat.
Thank you.
What I was going to ask Ariel is on the who they are versus what they do thing. I don't think you can actually separate the two. The way I see it is, let's take a bit more of an extreme example to make it clear. Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, as I see as a cult, to become a true Jehovah's Witness, you have to embrace ideas like shunning even your children if they do not believe. Now, at that point, is that something you're doing, or is that part of who you are?
But this is my point. Does it actually matter what the elders or the people in charge of Jehovah's Witnesses, what they actually think about God? Because they could think that, oh, God is love, God is life, but then they do this, and at the end of the day, that's the thing. Or alternatively, they could be complete atheists and just be running a cult in order to benefit off of people. Not saying that's something atheists do, just using this as an example that and so if that's the case, does it matter that they don't believe in God? No. What matters is how they're treating people, their actions. And so, like,
I do agree.
I agree with the thing, though.
In the real world, that's what matters, is the results. But if changing who you are, like Jehovah's Witnesses have this idea of putting on a new personality. So if becoming someone that causes you to do things Yeah, you see what I'm getting at?
So, yes, Sammy, basically what you're talking about is internalization, right? So when you have an idea
Yeah.
of who you are and what you're doing, right. So this whole idea of putting somebody on, we all kind of do it. Like, when I used to work for corporations and things, you had a work sort of persona that you put on because, there were certain things that you'd do in casual conversation that you wouldn't do in a professional workplace. Like you wouldn't swear off your head, or you wouldn't, do certain things. But it's when that that persona becomes internalized that you're like, this is who I am, rather than what I am doing. And it's sort of a problem across society when people are internalizing messages that aren't necessarily true, or doing things that conflict with their values because they have internalized the proclamations of somebody else. Like, you have to be this way. But I think that people.
So it's a fault of the creature rather than religions or beliefs themselves.
Well, there's certain organizations and certain places that will try to get people to internalize what they think they should be like a lot more than others. There are ones that basically, unless you act a certain way or do a certain thing, there will be repercussions for you, and they're trying to get that internalized across the board to everybody. And there is sort of a group mentality that when everybody is doing the same thing, it sort of makes other people do it as well. But I think that I don't really think that internalized behavior is people necessarily. I don't think people would do that without the structure of religion. I think that religion itself gets people to internalize these behaviors as normal and everyday, and just what we do, and for the greater good of some sort of deity or some sort of objective. And I don't necessarily blame the people for that, because I think Noam Chomsky once said it best: we all have the capability to be a saint and a gas chamber attendant. Right, we all can do that depending on the circumstances, and I think he's absolutely right. If you are around people that are doing a certain immoral behavior and they all say, "Hey, this is good," and you should do it as well, or else you're going to be shunned or thrown out or sort of excluded in some way, I think that we all naturally internalize that as normal. So I find that I can't blame the people in it. It is that indoctrination force of religion.
I agree.
In my view.
I think
I agree.
Richard's dying to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard. I am too, so I'll go after you.
Okay, so I just want to jump on it before someone takes my option. There are those who go church shopping or idea shopping until they find something that agrees with them.
Right.
So that they can justify their deviant behaviors. So there's that side of it. I mean, there's so many humans. So if that's the situation where they go shopping for an idea system where they can be their natural selves, that is, they found somebody that told the truth, then it's the exact opposite. That's genuinely who they are, and they're not internalizing something else. They just found something to agree with them.
That's a good point, Richard. But I mean, I was thinking of somebody born into the church kind of thing who went through that process. But
that's why I selected something else.
Yeah, most people. So yeah, I'm in agreement, especially with Mark. I think beliefs do matter. I think you're going to have your small percentage of people that are just genuine deceivers, and they will utilize belief systems that they don't necessarily believe in. Grifters, whatever. But I do think that beliefs matter, and normalcy matters, and I think that we're finding out so much now how childhood matters, and what happens in your childhood matters. And I'm with Mark. I'm very harsh. I take a very harsh stance against religion, But at the same time, I don't really blame the people in it, especially if they grew up indoctrinated. If you
Right.
grow up and you're told your whole life that this race is beneath you, that they're scum, that they'll steal from you, that they're evil, that they'll rape your sister, that they'll murder you, and you grow up thinking that's normal, then you don't really have any choice outside of completely doing a deep dive within yourself. And most people just honestly don't have the capacity to do that. They've been indoctrinated in a hatred their whole life, and they think that it's normal, and they think it's abnormal that you think otherwise. And I don't think that you can blame the person individually for that, for what happened in their childhood, whatever trauma was there as well. But at the same time, you have to hold them accountable because they are adult. But so it is this thing where I think that beliefs do highly matter, and they do kind of, what we're told as children is really, really hard to break when we're adults. And we don't even realize that half the damn time.
Yeah, my dad was a big prejudice, bigot, racist, just horrible, just absolutely horrible. And he would say things, and I'd go to mom and say, well, mom, what's your opinion on this? And she'd give me another view, and that didn't much match his. Don't know how they were married, actually. But and then my experience is what really decided how I felt about it. And since I didn't experience those kinds of things from people, I just assumed that my dad was angry or something.
No, I'm
And
glad
there
you
is
broke out of that sort of chain, Richard, because you're a lovely guy. I'm glad you broke out of that sort of hateful chain of learning.
I think all of us did.
Yeah, probably.
And there is something extra
I
to be
actually
said about.
grew up pretty secular, despite. I mean, it's also different because Jews, unless you're super Orthodox, it's going to be very different.
Something to be said for the strength of being born in, especially if you're in something fundamental or extreme. A lot of people who aren't ever in that situation can't comprehend that when you are born and you learn to speak, and then you start to go to school and you're taught how the universe works and science happens and things like that. When you're indoctrinated into one of these beliefs that go so adamantly against science and everything outside, and they're so insular, that you grow up in this bizarre reality that even if you manage to break away like I did, you end up with indoctrination hangovers that you're not aware of because of just the level of programming. And my example, I spent 20 years as what I thought was an atheist, only to realize that I still had this thing in the back of my head going, maybe Satan did fool me.
Right.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry to hear that,
Well,
Sammy.
Sammy, it's funny you mentioned. I had those thoughts recently myself. What if what the Christians say is true, and I am just been fooled by this supernatural force?
I got to be honest. I don't know how anybody could think that. I really don't.
I think I was really stoned.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get stoned, but the more and more I consider the argument from evil, the more and more I realize that I don't think I could be convinced of the truth.
Yeah, it didn't last. It didn't
Christianity or
last long.
Islam.
Leo.
And
But I thought about it.
that's exactly right, Leo. And that's how you end up breaking that indoctrination hangover, is to actually think about it. And, the more you think about it, you realize, yeah, this is illogical, it's ridiculous. And yes, I was just programmed as a child.
Yeah, the way that I did. Oh, if I could just say this real quick, because I'm going to totally forget.
Sure.
So the way that I broke it, because despite growing up, pretty secular, I mean, I did get a religious education, but it wasn't ever like my parents forced it on me. It was more so for the community, and I never, for me, this stuff was mainly fairy tales. Maybe that anyway, the important part though, and this is what really stuck with me, is because a lot of the research that I've been doing, because my area of study is also what's gotten me to be slightly religious in the first place, is realizing that the Israelites had a goddess, and that she was basically in the same time when so much of like God, what God was in the first temple, was changed into this idea of like, you know, this guy who sees everything you do, and you know he's going to punish you if you don't do what you like. A lot of those ideas seem to have been like superimposed back onto the past, or like retroactively imposed. But even despite knowing this, I was kind of like, well, you know, maybe I'm just some, you know, some heretic, and I'm, you know, going against what, like, even separate from, you know, what's real, just kind of like, you know, relative to my community. But the more that I researched this, I realized that the reforms that got rid of Asherah are the same reforms that got rid of the very thing that God supposedly commanded Moses to erect for the Israelites, but it was later seen as an idol. So you basically have to realize that they were doing idolatry commanded by God, and it was later seen as, you know, oh, well, God doesn't like idolatry. But the thing is, who was actually saying that? Humans. So like, so you have a subversion of the old religious traditions in favor of this, like, you know, new centralized one, which had a lot more to do with power. And realizing that, I realized that really this idea of, you know, Yahweh being this God who's out to punish you, that's something that the Second Temple introduced in order to gain power.
Yeah, and that further on that explains a lot of scholars now hold to the idea that all of these bizarre laws like Leviticus and whatnot weren't actually much or anything to do with their belief in God or their religion. They said that these came from God, but the idea of these laws was simply to separate them from their neighbors. So those heathenist Philistines over there eat crayfish, so we won't, because that, you know, we're better than them. So all of a sudden we have a law where God's saying don't eat crayfish. We look at it from a modern perspective and think, what the hell? Don't mix cloths? Why? Because those people mix their cloth. Those people wear cotton, so we'll wear wool. You know, and all of a sudden you have this weird law from God saying you have to wear wool. It makes so much sense when you look at it from an othering point of view, which is what religion is so good at doing.
Oh, and that was the other point, though. The word pagan, it's so ironic, because what do we think of as pagan now? You know, people who followed the, you know, Greco-Roman or Nordic or, you know, et cetera, pantheon. But you go back far enough, and the pagans were just people who practiced the religion that wasn't, you know, practiced in Rome. So, like, at the end of the day, people who weren't pagans became pagans, and now you have people who are pagans that wouldn't even be considered pagans in the ancient world.
Yeah. I think most Christians, if you went back 1,500, 1,800 years, would think that all Christians alive today were filthy heretics. And some perversion of Christianity. Well, I have to agree.
It's nothing close to what it started out as, and has very little to do with the Bible. Yeah, I mean, I agree with those guys.
Christians were the first atheists.
What?
They didn't believe they didn't believe in the Roman gods, so they were considered atheists.
I mean, technically, I think so. The Jews were also considered that, except because the Jewish tradition was older, it was considered to be legitimate, whereas the Christians were basically just be making this up so they didn't have to worship any gods.
First Christians literally got called atheists. They were considered atheists.
Well, they got called atheos.
I don't know what you just said.
I said the word that you said, but I said what the actual word is in Greek, atheos.
I don't know.
Oh, atheos.
But that word didn't last very long in that usage, being abandoned for the word asebis, which meant like a heretic, whereas then atheos was later adapted to mean literal godlessness.
Because they were referring to
i.e. what we today
gods,
understand as atheism, as the belief that gods don't exist.
Yeah, I'm totally being hyperbolic as fuck. I thought that was clear.
What were you saying, Mark? I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Oh, it's all right. No, I think that like anything, like I mean, I was reading about the Milgram experiments a while ago. So any authority, we kind of have a tendency to just submit to, and that's sort of been proven in multiple experiments. Is everyone familiar with the Milgram experiments?
Heard of them, but no, I am not.
I'd love to hear a briefing on that.
No.
So basically, what they did is they took volunteers and they basically had these actors pretend to be volunteers in this group. So they would have the person doing the control experiment, the actor on the other side, and the actual subject sitting there. But the subject was told that they were doing an experiment on that actor. So the examiner, the person doing the experiment, would ask a series of questions to the actor, and the person was told that when they got it wrong, they were to give them an electric shock, increasing in frequency.
Yes, I have heard this. And
Yeah,
it's
so
terrifying.
it is terrifying because they basically sort of said, okay, well, every time they get one wrong, we're going to increase the voltage of this electric shock.
Is this
kind
one
of
where
thing.
they just kept saying, please continue, please continue?
Yes.
And
Yes, and that's all they
Okay.
said. Please continue. You have to continue the experiment, kind of thing. So they thought the really immoral thing about it was the person being experimented on had no idea they were in an experiment. They were actually the subjects, while they thought they were assisting the person experimenting on the actor. So about, I think it was 40 something percent, or it might have been higher, it might have been 60%, sort of continued giving the electric shocks, not only during the person screaming, but after they had stopped screaming, after they had administered what they thought was a lethal dose of electricity. So, and that sort of, that shows that we kind of just accede to authority. We just kind of follow what we think authority figures
Can I ask
say.
a quick question, Mark?
Yeah, sure.
Just for clarification, because I think I may have heard of this. Is this the one where they brought the people in and they were asked questions, and if they got it wrong, someone else got shocked?
Yes.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
then they kept progressively increasing it, and then like people had to literally sit there, and that there was a control group where the people weren't actually getting shocked, but it was actors pretending to be. But then there was
Yeah.
the one where there
Oh.
were people that were
Well-
actually getting shocked.
Oh,
So
I
was
don't
there-
think this was the Milgram wasn't. They weren't actually being
No.
shocked. They just thought the other person.
Oh,
was
okay,
on the
okay.
phone.
All right, that's all I needed. Thank you.
And you know where that comes from? Which to me speaks to a need of God that we didn't touch on, is being able to shift our guilt. Hey, I've pushed the button, but I'm being told to. And as long as I'm following authority, I'm obeying orders. It's like the soldier. Can the soldier be, guilty if he's doing as he's told and he's not aware he has any
Yeah,
other
it's that
option?
degree of separation, isn't it? That separation
Yeah.
from, well, I didn't decide to do this. And I mean, you see that in corporate American, corporate world all the time. It's just, hey, I'm just doing a job. It's not me.
It's just
I
business,
just-
baby.
Yeah. To a
I think that's a
degree.
key point, though. Look how connected business and atrocity are. I mean, look at all the corporations who aided the Nazis just because they were making money.
Still happening today. Just they try and
I
be
mean,
more
we
subtle.
also shouldn't forget the whole reason that Nazi Germany was ultimately capable of rising in the first place, and that because the Nazis
Hitler was
wanted.
voted in. Let's not forget that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if
Interesting.
that's. I mean, I've heard that. I actually don't know if it's true because what I have read is that he was
They were.
nominated by the chancellor, or he was made the chancellor by the president, by President Hindenburg. I thought it was in 1933.
Yeah, but like so that's true. But the thing is, the Nazis got a majority in the Reichstag, or I don't know if it was a majority, but it was enough that they could, whenever they wanted to, pull out and collapse the government. So it basically Hitler forced it, but it was because people voted him in, or like voted the party in so much that they had that power.
Yeah, so I'm just, from what I'm reading here from Wikipedia, it says after 2 months of an ineffective Schleicher chancellery, Hindenburg appointed Hitler chancellor on 30th of January 1933 upon the recommendation of Papen. The Reichstag fire of 27th February was used as a pretext by Hitler to issue the Reichstag fire decree, which nullified constitutional protections of free speech and other civil liberties. Reichstag elections in March gave him a working majority, and he assumed dictatorial powers with the passage of the Enabling Act on the 23rd of March. Hitler succeeded Hindenburg as head of state upon his death in 1934, whereafter he abolished the office entirely and replaced it with the new position of Führer und Reichskanzler, cementing his rule. And yeah, so he wasn't voted in. He was elected chancellor, and then when Hindenburg died, he dictatorially took control of the country. He wasn't ever elected. That's what I thought. He wasn't ever elected into office.
Do you not understand? So elected to the office of chancellor, no, but they were elected into power.
Yeah.
Hey,
That
Leo,
doesn't
would you
seem
do
to
me a
be what
favor
this
and
said.
trying to
This
keep
said
this
that-
conversation moving? Leo, would you do me a favor and keep this conversation moving forward while I have a smoke?
Sure. But I'm just saying that this doesn't appear to be what is being said here, that Hitler was elected into a position of power and then succeeded the person who was more powerful than him after his death in a dictatorial manner by the passage of the Enabling Act. There was no election that voted him into that office. He assumed it after the death
He wasn't
of him.
voted
No.
into. He wasn't voted into chancellor. He was voted.
I'm
as
not saying chancellor. I'm saying that when Hindenburg died,
Yeah.
Hitler
So
abolished
here's what
the office that he held and assumed control of the government. That is not
So
an election.
Here's what you've got to understand about
Hmm.
the German system of parliament at the time. That there's usually multiple parties going for seats in the Reichstag, and his party got more votes by a long shot than any other party. Like, because of the way the system works, you've got to have a coalition of parties in order to assume power.
I understand that.
So his party got so much more, like by far, the sort of, so about in about
Well, I know
600
that the
seats,
Nazi Party had an unprecedented
Yeah.
wave of success in the elections. Adolf Hitler was never individually elected into the office he assumed. He disbanded
kind
the
of
office that
splitting hairs.
Hindenburg held, and he created a new office that he assumed dictatorially.
So the reason why Hindenburg made him the chancellor is because of the votes that
I know
his
that.
party that he
I
was
know that.
heading up, that he was heading up, got so many seats within the government that
Yes.
the way their parliamentary system works, if a party wins by a complete landslide, that their leader is usually given the, sort of nominated to chancellor, and that's how their system works. He
Yes,
wasn't
but
a
Hitler was
dictator
not
at
voted
that
into
point.
office.
Yeah, if I could just finish, Leo.
Yeah.
He wasn't a dictator at that point when he
I know
got
that.
nominated for chancellorship. The reason why he got nominated for a chancellorship is because millions of Germans voted for him. So you're kind of
No.
splitting hairs, saying, hey, when he took over the government, it was changing what a chancellor could do. Nobody's disagreeing with that. The way that he got there was through a voting system, not through like sort of militarily seizing the government or in some way taking over the government like that. He was voted into the position he was in.
No, he was not. He was put there by Hindenburg.
No.
No.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, well, yes
Hindenburg
and no.
put
So
him as the chancellor.
he was put there in Hindenburg because of him. His party had sweeping wins in the elections. So Hindenburg had to put him there because Hindenburg had no
Yes.
power. That's what you're not getting, Leo. So, Leo, you're right. Nobody's saying you're wrong. It's just you're not understanding the way that the German system works.
No, I am understanding it. It's just that I'm clarifying. No vote was cast for Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, nobody's
Votes
saying
were
that there
cast.
was.
He actually lost his election that he ran against Hindenburg. It's also true, because I just looked it up, that the Nazi Party never received more than 37% of the popular vote in any free national election in Germany. So he was appointed chancellor by Hitler. That is how he initially got put into power. Now, Hindenburg may have done that as a result of votes cast for the Nazi Party, but nobody cast a vote for Hitler to have that position. Hindenburg put him in it. Hitler
and I
was
don't think
not
anyone's
elected in
disagreeing
any
with that,
office
though.
he held.
I think when you're looking at things like sort of party politics in a country, I think it's sort of reductionist to say, hey, they voted for the party and not the leader of the party. When you're putting a party up and they do have a leader, people vote with the knowledge that that person is going to be there. Like, they don't vote for a party and go, well, it doesn't matter who's in charge of this party, we're going to vote for that party anyway. I think you're sort of really minimizing the effect that he had on the National Socialist Party of the day, and sort of saying, hey, nobody actually voted for him. I think that's just patently false.
Well, I don't think it is. There was no vote
Well,
cast for Hitler. It's just a true statement that he was not voted into any office he held.
Yeah, but
I understand what you're saying, Leo, because the way it's worded here, in January of the following year, with no other leader able to command sufficient support to govern, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Hitler Chancellor of Germany.
Appointed, not elected. Appointed. Thank you. That is my point.
That's how
He was
parliamentary
appointed to chancellor.
work.
He
Yep,
did
that's how their
not
system works.
win any election himself for any position that he held. That is a historical fact. You
Okay,
can
do
bitch
you
about
not
it splitting
understand-
hairs, but it's a factually,
It is.
objectively
how
true statement.
parliamentary
I don't care if
work.
it splits hairs. I don't care about any of that. It's a true statement.
Leo,
He
you're
did
gonna have
not
to calm
win
down,
any
mate.
election for any position that he held.
You're right, Leo.
Calm
You're
down.
right. You're right. We're all wrong. It's cool.
I didn't say anybody was wrong.
Yeah, I just want to compare it to Australia kind of thing, because we have a parliamentary system that is kind of similar. Like, we don't have, like, you have presidential elections over there where people vote for the person. We don't. We have two parties. They both have a leader. We're aware that when we vote for, say, the Liberal Party or the Labor Party, that leader will be the new prime minister kind of thing. That's clearly understood when we cast our votes. So when somebody goes back and says, hey, this person won the election, right? We don't say, hey, no, nobody voted for that person. They voted for the party. That person didn't win at all. Yeah, I'm really sorry. Like, get out of here. Like, seriously? Yeah, it's just splitting hairs. That person did win the election. Yeah.
The election was
I don't
for
know what to tell
Hitler.
you.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
Is
none of
that the
our
Nazi
elections are
Party?
for
The
people,
Nazi
Leo. You
Party
didn't
was
listen
winning.
to a word I
I'm
said.
literally at the
You
National
didn't
World
listen
War
to
II
a word
Museum.
I
Yes,
said.
I did. Yes, I did, and now I'm responding, if I may.
But
So I'm reading from the National World War II Museum history. Like, the Nazi Party was winning like other localized elections, and because it was a powerful political party, Hindenburg chose somebody from the party as chancellor to help lead the country.
Okay, you're not
There's
okay.
no election where anybody could select Adolf Hitler as somebody to serve in office. It was because of the
Leo, a
increasing. I haven't finished. It was because of the increasing political power of the Nazi Party that Hindenburg personally selected Hitler to serve as chancellor. He did not win an election, and I'm actually not splitting hairs here. He didn't win an
Can I
election.
ask a
He was
question, Leo?
selected as a result of the rising power of the Nazi Party.
He wouldn't have been
How do
selected.
you-
The Nazis would have pulled out of the block and forced a new election. That's what you're not understanding. They had enough to force new elections.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Who won the last Australian election?
I don't know. I don't see how anything that I'm talking about turns on Australian elections.
Because it's parliamentary.
Yeah, so-
You don't understand how parliamentary systems
Yes,
work.
I do understand how parliamentary
Yeah,
systems
so
work. What
the-
I'm saying
the
simply
last
doesn't turn
Prime
on that
Minister,
fact.
yeah.
That's what you guys
Well, I just
aren't
wanted an
understanding.
answer to my question. So the current Prime Minister is Anthony Albanese of Australia. Nobody voted for Anthony Albanese. Do you understand that? They only voted for the Labor Party. Do you understand that?
Sure, that's fine. I don't understand what I'm saying.
Okay,
turns
so
on
when
that.
I say Anthony Albanese won the last election, right? That would be like saying, well, nobody voted for him. Dude.
Yeah,
Of
this
course
is like
they
in the
voted.
UK. They don't vote for prime ministers, they vote for party. Like, I
Correct.
get it. You guys think I'm not
Correct.
understanding it. I do. It's just that nothing that I'm saying turns on that fact. You're just bringing up in a point irrelevant to mine. That's why I'm
It's not
continuously
irrelevant.
dismissing. Yes, it is.
But
Because
within that party, right?
it wasn't that like
So-
people voted for the Nazi party and then Hitler was selected. It was the rising power of the Nazi party.
Adolf
It wasn't
Hitler
like there was a national election and people voted for parties and then people voted for the Nazi party and then Hitler got selected. It was that the Nazi party was slowly rising in political power and Hindenburg chose one of its most prominent figures, prominent
chose
figure,
the
and one of
chairman.
its leading organizers at the time, Adolf Hitler,
Literally the
to serve
chairman.
as chancellor. He was never voted into any office. That is
Like,
a fact. I've looked it up.
per-
I've qualified what I'm saying. I don't understand this.
I love how you like change the word. Like you try to sound German when you say the German names. It's pretty cool.
Hitler was
yeah,
the
so-
chairman of the Nazi party. You can't just pretend that, like, oh, Hitler was just selected from among the Nazi party. He was literally the head of the Nazi party. When people voted
Yeah,
for the
I
Nazi
said
party-
that.
So within the
No.
Nazi party, how do you think he got to the top, Leo? That's the point Ariel's making.
To the
Do
top
you
of the
think
Nazi.
he
No,
just
he helped
walked
organize
there?
the Nazi.
Or do you
He's
think
part
the
of the reason
party-
the Nazi party
You don't
existed.
think they voted
No,
within
that's
the
not true.
party
Not true
to
at all.
make
He
him
was
win?
actually sent to infiltrate the Nazi party by the German military, and he fell
I
in
know
love
that.
with it.
Yeah, and
So
there
you said
wasn't
he
really
founded
much.
it.
Yeah, well, I didn't say that he founded it. I did not
Well, you
say
said
that he
he
founded
helped
it. That is
found it.
not what I said. I did not say that.
How
What I
does
said
this
is he
happen
helped
every
develop
time?
it, and he did. There was practically no Nazi party. What I mean by that is it was just this loose fucking nothing, and it became prominent largely because of Adolf Hitler, which is why Hindenburg selected him to serve as chancellor. And all of that is thoroughly consistent with the fact, the objectively true fact, that Hitler did not win any election to serve in any office that he held.
Except,
Yeah, so you heard it here first, people. People vote for parties and never the leader of the party. You heard
That's
it
not what
here
I'm saying.
first, it's obviously.
See,
Well,
now you
that
guys are
seems
just
to me-
caricaturing what I'm saying because you don't have a response. That's fine.
Look,
I
you're
think
just
I've made my
being
point. I'll move
absurd,
on.
Leo. You're being absurd. So we'll just move on and talk about something else because obviously you're a bit worked up about this. So just calm down, Leo. Seriously, I disagree with you. That's okay. You don't have to be right and show people you're right all the time.
I don't
You can
know
just say,
enough
"Hey,
about
disagree."
the politics. At
See,
the
now we're
time,
just
but does
psychologizing
anyone
about
know
people instead
whether, like in our
Okay.
politics,
Of
of
Mark,
responding to
hang
their
on,
points.
hang on. Within our parties, right? We vote for the party, but the party vote for their leader. Correct.
Correct.
Would
And
this
who
not
appoints
be
the prime
what?
minister?
Would this not be who, how Germany would have done it? Like he still would have had to be voted to be the top of the Nazis, like or was it just some sort of autocratic party where the previous leader chose the next leader? You're telling me Hitler was not voted into his position within the Nazi party?
Well, I think that's shifting the goalposts a little because you're sort of saying
No,
the
no,
people
because
No,
the claim
that's
was
not
he's
what I'm
never
saying.
been voted into any position he's ever held, any office he ever held.
Well, that's true. Yeah. So he was voted in as leader of the Nazi party. So he did get voted into something. But I guess, the weird thing about Australia is that the technically it's the Queen that appoints the Prime Minister. If you want to get like as splitty hairs as you want, technically it's the Queen that appoints the Prime Minister, not anybody else. But upon going to vote, you're aware that you're voting for a person who is the leader of that party, and you vote for the party to support them. I don't see anything unusual about that in these kind of democracies. And from there, everything you say is absolutely true. He was appointed because of the massive groundswell support he got, and then he took over. Like I get what you're saying from there, but I still think he had the support of the majority of the people going into that position.
Hitler?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to dispute that. I don't know whether he had like the majority support of the country, but I mean, I could just grant that. I wouldn't be surprised if it were true.
Hey,
Well, I mean,
Well,
as far as my research went, I can't remember their names, but they were really prominent, famous, three famous Protestants in Germany. Really smart people, knew their theology, had the support of the people, and he got those three people on his side, and they were pretty much preaching Hitler from the pulpit. You know, like he had like overwhelming support of the German people, and that's how. I mean, no, I was trying to say, like, everybody's right here. It's just. You know, like, no, there's no national election for Hitler, and you're totally correct. Like the one national election where he actually did run it, he lost it, but that was before he had made the pact with the I can't remember their names, but they were really famous Protestant people that pretty much ran Germany. Like they had all the power.
Okay, so can I read something really quickly? Because I think I just think that regardless,
so we can understand.
Yeah. So by the 1930s, the Weimar government was increasingly challenged from forces on the right. Hindenburg abandoned some of his more moderate positions in order to appease right-wing critics. In the 1932 Reichstag election, Hitler's Nazi party received 37.4% of the vote, the most obtained by any single party. Hitler demanded the chancellorship as a result. Hindenburg refused. His contempt for the quote-unquote Bohemian corporal was not a secret. This rejection humiliated Hitler. When Hitler proceeded to reject the less powerful position of vice chancellor, he received a lecture on his lack of dedication to duty from Hindenburg, who allowed their exchange to be leaked to the press. Hitler withdrew his party support, forcing yet another round of elections. So yes, his party received the majority of the support. He demanded the position, was later denied, and then eventually Hindenburg did appoint him to the
so why did he
to the position. Why? I haven't read that far. I can if you want me to.
And the thing is, well, because every successive election, the Nazi Party was gaining more and more influence and more votes. So basically,
Exactly. I said, their rising power, which is what I said initially.
Again, but the only reason they had rising power was because they were being voted in. And you can say, well, they weren't voting for Hitler.
Which is what I said. That they were winning elections.
But that's
and
kind
they were
of like
rising in power. And that's why Hindenburg
Well,
appointed.
Leo,
I'm sorry, but like,
It's what everybody said. Everybody's right here. Everything. Oh my God.
Yeah, I
everybody's
agree.
right.
No.
Everybody's agreeing. Everybody's arguing about semantics, but everybody's right, man. Like even what you just read, Leo, it fits perfectly with what Mark and Ariel has said and what I've said. But it also fits with what you said. I mean,
his party was very popular.
Yeah, we all agree.
Elections, and then he was appointed into his position, and then dictatorially assumed power. Hitler himself was never voted in any position. That was the only claim that I made, and it is a true claim. That's all I've been saying, and people have been disputing that with things that I already agree with, that I don't think
we're
demonstrate the falsity of that
disputing
central claim, and I've just been continuing to defend the claim. That's
so
it.
we're not saying it's false. We're saying it's missing the point.
I'm saying it's false because you're saying any position he held, and I just showed how he was voted into.
I said any office. I said any office, not any position.
Well, how is the
Yeah, the
leader of the
office
Nazi
of
Party
chairman.
not an office?
Honestly, no, I don't think I would consider that a political office.
Okay.
A position, sure, but not
Fair
an
enough.
office. Office is usually something officialized.
It's
But
the
I mean, you're not
office
wrong.
of
He
the
won.
chairman of the Nazi Party.
What was that?
The office of the chairman of the office of the Nazi Party, the office of the chairman of the Nazi Party. Like that's literally it's an office. It's publicly elected.
But it's not like in like the centralized government. It would be like the head of the Democratic like National Committee. Like, sure, that's a political office, but it's not like in the government.
Hey, Leo,
Like,
is
I'm
this
sure,
true?
I'll grant you that. There was a political office that he held. I was wrong when I
That's
said
true.
that. I'll grant you that.
That's 100% true because Britain used the same system of parties, kind of thing. So,
Well, no,
Winston
it's not the
Churchill was
same,
never
actually.
elected into office. If I could just finish, Winston Churchill was never elected into office because in these systems, the Westminster system, particularly, you vote for a party, not an individual.
Well, but it's not the same because the prime minister is the person who leads the country. The chancellor actually wasn't in Germany. The president was, and Hitler didn't win the office of president. He was appointed into Winston Churchill. Churchill was not appointed prime minister.
Yes, he was.
No, that's
Technically,
not.
he was. He was appointed by the Queen. Yeah.
No,
Same
not
as our
really.
You don't understand how these systems
Yes,
work, Leo.
yes.
He's
We can
appointed-
vote for a prime minister, but the Queen
I've
can
actually
say
read quite
no.
extensively on the English system of government, actually, because of my interest
Oh, really?
in like the 17 and 1800s English history and the East India Company, all that stuff. So like, and even into the modern age, like, yeah, I'm not saying I'm some sort of like expert or something, but
Uh-huh.
to say that I don't understand it, I don't think that's accurate.
Sorry, which system are you?
So, and the thing is that it was
which
a
system
national
did you
election.
study?
It was
Leo,
a
which
national
system did you
election.
study?
Well, that's not really relevant to the point that I'm making.
Well, no, what's the
So
name
the
of
national, so the thing with the English system is
You
that
don't
those
even
are
know the name of the
national.
system
Is
you
that those
study?
are is that what the bicameral parliamentary system that the United Kingdom has? It's
Yeah,
not
but what
relevant
one
to the point I'm making,
specifically?
and I really
It is
don't
a
care about the
bicameral
meta.
system, yeah.
So
What's
the
name of
thing
it?
is in the English
What's the name
system
of
is that like
Leo?
it's
What's
a
the name of it?
national election and you vote
He
for the
doesn't
party,
know.
but even before the election is held, what you have is
Yeah,
that the party
it's the
selects somebody to
Westminster
represent
system.
the
I
party.
even mentioned
That's
it
sure,
earlier.
that's fine.
The Westminster
They
system.
select
even know
somebody
the
from
name of the
within
system you're
party
talking
to
about.
represent the party if the party happens to win the national election. That was not actually what was going on with respect to the Nazi Party. It was a broad set of victories, and then a later election in which the Nazi Party won a lot of votes in. Winston Churchill wasn't like appointed the way that Hitler was appointed. I'm sorry, it's just not the same. The way that
That's
Hitler
not what
rose to
we
power,
said.
the way that Hitler rose to
what we
power
said.
is
You're
is
moving the
entirely different from the way that Winston Churchill was quote unquote appointed into office. So the analogy is it's just not similar at all.
So I
the
think this would
reason
be a
why-
good time to have a stream about picking on people who are religious.
Sure. So the whole idea of the Westminster system is that it's party based, and the Queen ultimately decides who is put into power. Now, I mean, there are a lot of wrong things or sort of problematic things about it. For instance, the leader can be removed by the party or technically by the Queen, as we have seen in other Commonwealth countries. So they're only there at the discretion of the Queen ultimately at the end of the day. And as we've seen, even the party can remove that individual from the prime ministership, as Theresa May and Boris Johnson were actually removed. They weren't voted out. And the party put another person in their stead. So this is because when you do vote under the Westminster system, that you're voting for the party and not an individual. So according to the logic of Leo, Winston Churchill, Boris Johnson, there's no English
What
person
logic
that
is
has
that?
ever won an election. Excuse me, I'll just finish. There's no English person that has ever won an election, kind of thing, because they've only had votes for their party, not for an individual. And they were appointed by the Queen because ultimately she or he, now the King, does have the final say over what happens, even though by tradition, going forward, they've never objected to any head of state being put in. Yeah, this is a development of Godwin's law. Absolutely.
But I'm
So you
kind of
said my
suspicious because
logic.
actually
What
it
logic
happened
is that?
early on. But I guess statistically,
But-
sometimes Godwin's law would come true early in a conversation too, wouldn't it?
Oi, I was just posting it in the chat.
But yeah, just one quick
You
thing.
said my logic. What logic is that? Because as far as I know, it's just
That if-
classical logic. What like
that
everybody
if you vote
uses.
that if you vote for a party, that you're not voting for the head of that party.
When did I say that? When did I
When you
make
said
that claim?
Hitler was
Voters won.
Can you
said
find
that
the
was
timestamp
nobody-
where I made that claim, please?
sure.
I don't recall
So you
making that
made-
claim.
If you let me talk, you said that nobody ever voted for Hitler.
That's
Did
not
you
what I
not say
said.
that?
That is not the claim that I made. No.
He was never voted into any office or something like
I
that.
said Hitler was not voted into power, and he wasn't.
You said that he was not voted into any office.
I believe
I
that's
said
an
he
accurate
wasn't
quote.
I
voted into
remember you
power,
said
and
office
he wasn't.
many times.
And
because
then I
you
did
backed
say
off
office,
saying
and then
position.
Ariel mentioned something, and I actually admitted I was wrong and retracted that claim, if you'll remember. My claim initially,
remember
which
any-
even into office was not even
I-
actually my
I don't
initial
remember any
claim,
retraction
which
in this
was
conversation.
well, I'll go
with
back
you,
and find the
Leo.
timestamp when I'm done speaking, and then show
Be
it to
happy
you.
to play
But
it.
my initial claim
I'm
in the
sure you
discussion
will.
was that Hitler was never voted into power, which he wasn't.
All right,
Hard
so
to- But I also
si-
wanted to respond really quickly, if I may,
Yeah,
to
so
Stephanie Helms in
using
the
that
chat. She said the
logic,
National
you could,
Socialists were the largest party in the Diet. That's why the president appointed its head chancellor. Leo was incorrect, aka wrong, but I said exactly the same thing. That President Hindenburg appointed Hitler the chancellor in virtue of the rising popularity and the recent victories of the elections of the National Socialist Party.
I got my
So
hand
I'm
up.
not wrong there. I was
Hand
not
up.
incorrect because I
Hand up.
said that.
So
Hand up.
using Leo's logic, Winston Churchill.
But what
was
is my
never
logic?
voted
You
into
haven't
power.
outlined that yet. It's like
I
the third
got,
time
I've
I'm
got a
asking.
great idea. I've got a great idea. Leo, you're completely right about absolutely all of it.
I already
Now we
did
can
that.
Move on.
Nothing.
I already said
this
that.
doesn't have anything to do with being right or
So-
wrong.
I just got to interject, and then you guys can go back to arguing. So the side chat wants us to stop arguing about Nazis. I'm taking bets. I got an hour and a half, but the side chat needs to understand we're not arguing about Nazis anymore. We're arguing about whether or not Leo's right, and that's so hour and a
Well,
half
that's not
at
what I'm
least
arguing about.
2.5, 3 hours tops. I mean, we're taking bets. I got a pool going, taking all bets.
What's the difference right now? What's the spread?
Can I put a 50 on an hour and a half?
Oh.
Yeah, even Puff in the chat agrees. I did acquiesce on that point because I did.
But then you went to say
yeah, I
that
remember that.
Hitler wasn't voted into
Come
power.
on, guys. Let's move it on.
No,
I think
I
we
was
should move
acquiescing
it.
on the point that he wasn't voted into
I
office.
have to get going really soon, but I just wanted to ask Leo real quick. Why did you say, like, you know, what's the point, or like you seem to say that it's irrelevant that the Prime Minister of Australia is, you know, in a similar position? Because like the point that we're trying to make is that so many governments don't, you know, vote people into office that like you're talking about, but that doesn't mean that they're not voted into power.
Sure, but that nothing that I'm saying turns on that. My point
Can I
is that
ask
Hitler was not voted
Ariel?
into power, and that the system that Germany was using is somewhat similar in virtue of it having been a parliamentary system, but it is not in any way isomorphic to either the Australian system or the English system. And I don't think that any historian would say that Hitler rose to power in the way that Winston Churchill did, or in the way that any modern I don't know if they're called a prime minister in Mark. I really don't. So excuse my ignorance here if that's not what they're called. But the prime minister, the president, or the leader of Australia or of the United Kingdom in modern age has. I'm sorry, I just don't think any historian is going to grant that. I'm almost certain of it.
Did you guys know that ash is one of the hardest woods available, and yet not considered an exotic wood?
Hey, so I've got a question, and I think this is the
I
real.
didn't know that. Tell
This
me
is
more.
the question that needs to be answered with what you guys have been talking about for like the past 30 minutes. Was Hitler in space with Space Jesus? So is this like Space Hitler?
Celestial
No,
Hitler.
he's there now, though.
Because I mean, I
He's
think
in
that's the
heaven
direction.
now.
That's the direction. One, a congratulations to Richard for all of
Thank
the
you.
subs. Yeah,
It's their fault,
absolutely
not
wonderful.
mine. Yeah.
And two, is this Space Hitler? Are we done with Space Jesus? No more Space Jesus on Richard Mattson. It's all Space Hitler.
Can I ask Ariel a religious question? Before he goes?
Hi, guy. I
And
just
that
wanted to
might-
say hello. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hello. Ariel, when do you think was the death of the divine female from the Jewish to the Christian religion? Do you think it happened within the Jews or not until Christianity?
No, it happened before Judaism really was even a thing. It happened at the end of the First Temple period when was it Josiah got rid of all the Asherah that his father had placed back in the temple, and like a bunch
So
of
the
other
Jews
stuff.
didn't have a divine feminine of any sort?
No, they did, but it was basically I'd almost argue it's like they sucked the spirit out of Asherah, shoved it down into Yahweh, and then they basically discarded the spiritless body of Asherah. That they like basically they it's hard to explain, but basically they just co-opted a lot of the imagery of Asherah into God, and basically said that wisdom or chokhmah, which is like he created at the beginning of his works, is basically like has all these same like epithets and stuff. So I mean, it's basically her in everything but name.
Yeah.
And
Actually-
and on that, what do you make of the Song of Solomon?
It's a hero scamos.
Yeah, use English.
It's a sacred marriage between God and Asherah, or between like
That's the way I kind of yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Midnight
Christian
Sparkle, would you
thinking.
unmute so I can adjust your volume up to where everyone else's is, please?
Okay,
Thank you.
hello.
Hello,
Hey,
Midnight.
How you doing?
I'm doing
Hello,
well.
Midnight.
Hello.
I'm glad to see you got rid of that white fox.
It wasn't a fox.
What fox?
We were all
it
over
was
on
a raccoon, good sir.
we were all over on William Freeman's channel. He uses the raccoon that's going like, you know, the devious raccoon. That thing. And we all adopted raccoon. And oddly enough, Midnight was able to find an albino raccoon. It's true.
There. Big figured.
There it is.
So to answer your question though, there's actually a part, I forget if it's in the Tanakh or if it's in the Talmud, but or actually no, it's either in the Tanakh or in the writings of Rashi on the Tanakh. But
Okay.
basically, there's this one place where he phrases it like Eshra Shachanti Betocham, which means I will appoint my presence among you, or like to dwell amongst you. But the thing that's interesting is if you take away the Masoretic vowels, it's Asherah Shechinati, which means Asherah my Shechina. And so like it's not just that, there's a bunch of things, but it's very clear that Asherah is a name of the Shekhinah.
Shekinah is I've heard that it's a spirit. Is that
So literally it means the dwelling or the indwelling spirit. So that's
Okay.
actually like it's basically the Holy Spirit, and there's also a term used Rucha de Kudsha, which is Aramaic for Holy Spirit. But literally the Christians got it from the Jews.
right?
And
Weirdly enough, there's a Native American praise word that sounds very, very similar to that. In fact, there's a couple of them, but that's at least biased.
interesting. Something that I only learned or like realized yesterday is that the Hebrew word, I mean it's modern Hebrew, but word for neighborhood is derived from the same root. It's shchuna, which basically means a dwelling place. But it's also interesting because this idea of God coming down to earth to dwell amongst humans, Christians take that idea and make that into, well, that means that dwell amongst means dwell amongst humans as a human, as opposed to dwell amongst humans as a spirit.
Yeah.
And what's a spirit? Because I have a very, narrow
Yeah, I mean-
definition for spirit.
Basically, it's understood. I mean, I think you could even maybe view it as it's not necessarily, I don't know, it's complicated, but it's almost like not the matter, but what's in between the matter. So not necessarily like antimatter, but it's essentially like that which can be experienced but cannot be grasped. And like that's why spirit and wind are so connected, because you can feel the wind, but you can't grasp it.
You can't grab it with your hand, right? That's the idea. Yeah.
And
So is
so
it kind of invisible forces or intangible forces kind of thing? That
I mean, like I think that in some ways, it's like, I mean, it's difficult because there's also the word neshama, which also means like it's a type of soul. But the thing is that comes from the root nasham, which means to breathe. So there's breathe, and then there's spirit. So it's almost like it's really complicated.
It is so far removed from our modern concept, isn't it?
Not really. Not really. We use a like idea the same way, and we even call it spirit. In fact, all I have to say is something like
Yeah,
the spirit of football.
yeah.
Yeah, but
He's down
No, it's
spirited.
not being personified. That's the key thing. Like, the thing is, the spirit of wisdom or the Holy Spirit is personified. It's not just like, oh, like I feel like you can, like, if you feel the Holy Spirit, like, you know, you feel His inspiration. You're not, like, what you're feeling is from the Holy Spirit, but you're not actually like feeling that. So in that, or I mean, my point is, like, if you feel like, what is the spirit of football actually? It's like it's so amorphous, but it's not personified. Like for instance, like you have what is it? Like America gets personified.
Uncle Sam.
Yeah. Well, and also even before that into a woman, and that's kind of where the whole idea, like you have this fusion of Columbia, the goddess of peace, with this image of America, and that ends up becoming the Statue of Liberty.
Yes.
Lady Liberty, yeah.
But I think that something like school spirit, I sort of see that more as metaphorical than it sort of describing
Yeah.
something like a spirit, or like in the Holy Spirit kind of thing, where it's an actual thing rather than like. Do you think of school spirit as something that exists, or do you see it that as hyperbole for a generalized feeling that people share?
Option B, but I think there's nothing terribly
Right.
wrong with hyperbolically assigning personhood to such a thing, and perhaps I could even go so
Sure.
far as to say something like the feminine aspect god Asherah is the personification of wisdom, in that that's what she represents, even though she's her own being, her own personage, that she represents that in like a King of England representing England kind of way. Not that he is England, that would be silly, you know, but that he is a personification of an office, something like that.
Would
Okay.
you say, Ariel, that you're saying it's more descriptive than prescriptive? That, to give a really rough example, a better modern word would probably be supernatural, because it encompasses all the things that we can't grasp, but we can conceptualize.
I don't quite follow, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I'm not getting that either.
So your description of spirit as the parts that are in between the parts we can experience in this physical realm, if you want to put it that way, is kind of similar to the idea of supernatural or extra natural. The parts that aren't in the natural experience.
Not necessarily, because, like, while there are supernatural associations with it, it's also understood that basically it's present in every part of nature. Like,
Which we can do with supernatural as well. There are people who would say it's not supernatural, it's part of the natural world that we don't, because we don't comprehend it or understand it where it comes from, we call it supernatural, but it's actually part of the natural universe. Like Richard would say, his idea of prayer is not supernatural, it's natural.
But see, the thing is, I've heard sort of spirit described as breath as well. And so to those ancient people, the breath may have been something supernatural to their minds. Like they might not know why humans need to take in air and breathe it out again. So sorry,
I mean,
Eric, go ahead.
yeah, just real quick, because I am going to probably get going in a few minutes. I have Shabbat dinner, but so basically, you have this idea that I think is it after the flood, God says, like my spirit, literally my ruach, will not abide in mankind forever, and so he limited their days to 120 years. So with this, you can understand that the ruach is that which gives you life, but furthermore than that, it doesn't just extinguish wet. It's almost like it's not the breath itself, but it's that which is like anchored by the breath. And once the breath is gone, that goes off back to its source. That would probably be the understanding. So it's still like it's part of you, but it's like, and then you also have like, so the nefesh is kind of like the bodily soul. So it's basically your consciousness, the part of you that is extinguished when you die, but that there's higher parts of you that are understood to still, supernatural Shabbos. But yeah, oh yeah, looking forward to some matzo ball soup. But basically, so there's different parts of you, and then the neshama I think is actually higher than the ruach. But so like at the end of the day, I mean, you have to keep in mind a lot of this is thought up by people who live in a completely different context than us. So trying to fit it into one that is understandable to us is kind of like trying to cobble together a perfect pantheon, like, or a perfect family tree of gods, when in reality you'll realize like multiple characters have multiple parents, like, and and then they're related to different people, and then they're married to someone, and then they kill someone, and then it's like, it's just,
and it depends who you're talking to, right? Like they have different ideas depending on the areas they're in and what kind of culture they come from. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for letting me pick your brain anyway, Ariel. I could do it all night,
thanks,
honestly.
Of course. I mean, there's always a future.
And at least it got us off Hitler. You're muted, Richard.
Yeah, I said yes. I don't even want to mention it. Just want to move on. Just want to move. Don't even want to go back.
Shusha.
What's that?
Dear. I might have to get another coffee actually. Oh, it just means shush. Just placate somebody. I don't know. It's just something that I guess my family has said, like shusha. Like when you're trying to shush a baby or a dog or something. I don't know. Look, Australians are weird, all right? Just leave us alone.
No, I'm okay with the local expressions. Even family knit group expressions is fine.
Australianisms are really good, like really good. Yeah,
they're fun.
I don't know. Do you call your wife mother? Because if you don't, you're not Mike Pence weird.
Oh, yeah, that is pretty weird.
Yeah.
I don't know, but we call Speedos, we call them banana hammocks and budgie smugglers.
Dick stickers.
Dick stickers, yeah. I love budgie smugglers. That is so good.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I don't know the word budgie.
It's a
small
parrot.
bird, like a little parrot.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. It's hiding down there.
I'm sorry for your deformities.
You're smuggling budgies.
Okay.
Ox says, flat earthers say Aussies ain't real. Can you prove you are? Oh, I don't know, mate.
No.
I don't know.
AI is pretty good nowadays.
Yeah, right. Oh, I got to get another coffee, so excuse me.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry, but I'll be back.
Okie dokie. Yeah, I think it's way odd when, in order to maintain monotheism in an idea where God the Father doesn't even have a female escort of any kind, Christians will espouse that the Song of Solomon is Solomon being way too sexy time with another male figure. And then some people will go so far as to say Solomon was probably bisexual or homosexual. And all of that is an effort for them to deny the female aspect.
But doesn't he mention breasts like towers?
He literally says breasts more than once, yes.
Tell me they don't try and say he's referring to a dude with hard nipples.
Yes, they say things like that.
Oh my God. Yes, Leah.
So I wanted to respond something if I made it was said a couple minutes ago.
Go ahead. Floor's yours.
So I can't. It was either, I think it might have been Ariel. Maybe it was Bob, Mark. Somebody said it. And not that they're necessarily advocating this position. I think they were kind of just. It sounded like they were just throwing it out there as an idea, but it's just an interesting one that I did want to respond to. The notion that supernatural could mean something that is ultimately natural, but that we just don't understand. I've heard that a lot. I just don't think that's how most metaphysicians are going to characterize supernatural. I think it's something generally considered to be fundamentally dissimilar from the natural. And so that it's not really going to be possible for something to be, at least in some like ontological sense, both natural and supernatural. Whereas, the supernatural is understood as something fundamentally distinct or dissimilar from the natural. But more than that, I think that, and this is something that I would say personally is a point in favor of naturalism, is that when we talk about the natural, I think that we can provide some sort of meaningful understanding of what that is, of what that concept contains, what it means to talk about the natural, whereas the supernatural isn't quite as well defined. And I think that that's probably going to be one of the biggest distinctions between the two.
And where would you, Leo, where would you categorize, sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic, that which is yet to be discovered by our sciences?
Well, I don't think I would agree with the idea that sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic. I would say that sufficiently advanced technology looks like sufficiently advanced technology. But
okay.
I don't think that us observing some sort of technology, I honestly, I don't think most people would even think that it was magic. Like if most people, let's say that like 90 million people in the United States saw a massive floating craft and like it was verified on radars and everything, I don't think people are going to assume it's something supernatural. I think they're going to assume it's either extraterrestrials or some sort of government technology that we're just not aware of.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But I think hidden in that is the assumption that people used to be dumber. Now, I'll agree with people used to know less things than we know now, but I don't think they were dumber.
I don't either.
Okay, good.
Well,
I just wanted to make sure that.
I think that you can look at the past and what some people saw as supernatural that we know as just natural things, so a really bad thunderstorm or a hurricane system roaring through, and people thought it was the gods supernaturally punishing them or whatever. And we figured these things out over time. I think the argument kind of applies to like say one day in the far future, using really, really advanced technology, we somehow prove the afterlife, right? Like whether there's another dimension like we go to when we die. Well, in proving that, then that supernatural thing that we've always considered supernatural, we would have mathematics behind it. We would have very natural reasons for believing in that. Now it would become part of the natural world. I think that's what the argument is entailing.
Yeah, that's
there you go.
That's personally why I think we should be using, rather than supernatural, the term mystical, because it doesn't imply that it's beyond natural. It just implies
Wait, the term what? I didn't catch that.
Mystical.
Mystical. Yeah. Well, for me, I would just ask, what do you mean by mystical?
An uncanny experience that like just completely breaks with normal fundamental reality.
Like, do you mean like violates laws of physics, or like just something that is far outside of our so it's just something that lies far outside of our intuitive experience?
Just experience. It doesn't have to imply that it actually is outside of reality. It's just something that we experience outside of our own. For instance, say that you, like the story of Abraham and the three guests that are understood to be referring to God, the angels, but that basically God was testing Abraham through the three angels. Like, I personally have had an uncanny experience with just someone in, just for context. So I was going to get some food at this one place, and this one guy who happened to be homeless, he had this one cup, and he came into the restaurant and asked if he could rinse it out. And he was going to, kind of pointing towards the, the soda fountain. And, I expected them to be like, are you kidding? That's going to dirty the soda fountain. But the guy was like, here, give it to me. And so he took it to like, a proper sink and he rinsed it out for the guy. And like that, I don't know. So that in and of itself, that just kind of warmed my heart. But that was just, that. But then, and I mean, given I was wearing a kippah, so it's not like there's no way you could have known. But this one guy who I'm assuming probably wasn't Jewish, then said to me in basically unbroken Hebrew, the blessing over the bread. And like, obviously, I know that, it's not like beyond, it's not something that can't happen in normal life. Like it is, or rather it's something that can happen in normal life, but it just felt so uncanny that like, I wouldn't call that supernatural, but I would call that mystical. But then you go into stuff like, say, someone has some sort of, transcendent experience. It's not supernatural because it happened due to their biology, regardless of what caused that. So I think it's more useful to call it mystical.
I mean, I
Sorry,
can
I'm
agree
coming in
with-
late, but what do you mean by transcendent? I mean, you can have a transcendent experience on drugs, right?
That's kind of what I'm referring to.
Yeah, and he's saying you would call that mystical as opposed to a supernatural
Can I
experience.
provide a response there really quickly?
Or slowly in normal speed would be okay.
So I can agree with your characterization of these things as mystical. I'm not saying that that can't be done or that it's not useful, but I think at the end of the day it's going to miss the mark, because I think that what's going to be asked is, what is the ontology of something that is mystical? Are mystical things natural or supernatural? So I think it just kind of takes us a step above what that fundamental level is with respect to the ontology of the things that we experience. Are they natural or are they supernatural? And so,
Well, I think it
not
depends.
that it's wrong or anything to characterize that, but and not that it's being done purposefully, but I think with respect to like fundamental ontology, such a distinction might obfuscate the discussion a bit.
Well, it depends on how you're looking at the word mystical. I remember that paper that they wrote that sort of famously theists used to say, hey, supernatural is real, because it mentioned mystical experiences kind of thing. But it made it quite clear that the mystical experience was just the perception of the person to view it as mystical rather than something supernatural in and of itself. So I know that papers have used the word mystical to define a sense of connectedness, a sense of transcendence, but it wasn't saying something transcendent to reality. It was saying that the perception, the sense of that is the mystical experience. So I have no problem with the way that he's using it right now. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. I do apologize.
No worries. It's Ariel.
Ariel. Yeah, sorry, Ariel. I do apologize, mate. I don't have a problem with that. But you're right. I mean, that paper was used by tons of theists to say, hey, look, supernatural things exist. Here's some scientists talking about the mystical and how this mystical experience is a common thread throughout humanity. So I don't disagree with you, Leo. I think it needs to be made clear what you're actually referring to.
I like to kid that, and it's before I ever heard, the sufficiently advanced technology. Because reading the text, I see it describing great technology said in a very, very, very simplistic, ancient way. I like to kid or half kid. If you had a cell phone, without a rubber cover on it, just a bare cell phone, and you had it in the days that the Bible was written, it might go something like this. And the stranger carried in his hands a black onyx stone, and he spoke to the stone. And when he spoke to the stone, it glowed with the light of the moon, and the stone spoke. And it answered to his question. It would go something like that.
That was actually really beautiful. Like, that really is. I think that's exactly how they would describe it, Richard. I think that was really, really good.
Thanks.
I think that next time I use my phone, that's exactly what I'm going to say.
So hopefully we won't think that now, but I can certainly see people of it. If something is flying in the sky silently and it's the size of a city, we would go, oh, technology, and that would be obvious to us. But I don't think everything is that evident and obvious, and some things are more subtle.
So
And I think it could apply in situations. Go ahead, sir.
I
where was
agree
that
with that.
No, Richard
was
made
what?
it up. That he was that's
oh
what you quoted. He's saying how someone in the ancient past would describe witnessing you using your mobile phone.
I
Right.
didn't know if that was like an example from some text.
No, I just
Can
made
I-
that up just now.
I'd
But
like
it did
to.
sound pretty cool.
I'd like to respond to Puffalophagus' comment, not to disagree, but just to sort of elaborate on it, if I may.
Oh yeah, just real quick, I'm heading off. Nice talking to you all.
Okay.
Have a great night. Peace and respect.
Have a lovely
Nice
day.
to meet you,
Ariel. See you, mate.
Good
All right,
night,
Ariel.
Ariel.
So I like this comment. I don't disagree. I think it's correct. I would not disagree with this comment. I think that if you went back with, like Richard said, I think if you went back like 2,000, 2,500 years, you would see things written like what he just said. Like that's how they would describe somebody who went back with like an iPhone. But at the same time, the reason that I don't think that humans today are going to look at it that way is because of the vast cultural, differences between humans 2,000, 2,500 years ago and humans today. 2,500 years ago, they had no concept of electricity and electromagnetism and modern technology and all of this stuff. They didn't know how vast the universe was. They didn't know about all of the forces and everything that act within it and how they could be harnessed to better furnish, the ways that we live. And so they would have just thought, oh, this is magic. This violates all the regularities of the world that I know. Whereas today we understand that there is actually, that we know a lot, but there is also much more out there that we don't know. This is something that we understand. And it's not that people thousands of years ago didn't understand that, more so that it is that we understand it differently. That if we were to see something similar that was as advanced to us as a phone would be to humans 2,500 years ago, we wouldn't say, oh, that's magic. We would say this is a form of technology far beyond what we have the capability of understanding. But I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think most humans would say that it's supernatural unless they were speaking in some sort of flowery sense, facetiously perhaps.
Have you been inside a fundamentalist church, Leo?
I
Those
don't
people
think I
will
can
believe
say that.
anything.
Leo catches into flames every time he steps inside a church, quite frankly.
Dude, those people will believe any fucking thing.
And I want to talk a little bit about what
Maynard saves just
Go
for
ahead
a
and finish.
second.
Yeah. No,
Because that
go ahead.
would you not say, Richard, that is actually, although you would probably say the iPad, like
is
six,
ancient piece of crap. Yeah.
yeah, but that's the basic idea of
Yeah.
what you believe.
Yeah.
The Book of Life is a computer with.
It's yes, it pretty much. I'm sure it is. I'm sure all of it's tech. Maybe that their brains work better than ours. Maybe that they make better AI than we ever could. Those kinds of ideas. It's really interesting to me how much carried over into Christianity from Judaism in a time when the Jews did not have a telescope. It makes good sense to me that, without a telescope and just first-person observation, it looks like you're on a flat earth. It looks like there's a dome of the sky. It looks like everything's pretty much equidistant if you didn't have some better technology. So it's hilarious to me that carried over into Christianity, where we now know that there are absolutely huge objects, in fact, entire galaxies, which light we can see being bent in gravitational lensing around some other large heavy object between us and that. So we know there's a big light source back there, but we can't see it. So those kinds of observations, we know there's giant objects that we can't see, literally. But because they didn't have those kinds of ideas for lack of technology, it's funny to me that Christians have put heaven in some other plane of existence, like in an alternate universe or something.
Well, they have to.
Just because people couldn't see it in the sky. Go ahead.
Well, they have to. It's because sort of the idea of God is sort of retreating So God used to be on top of a Mount Olympus, and then it was in the sky, and then we sort of able to fly into the sky, and God's not there. So then it's in outer space. But now we're starting to explore space. There's still no God. So they have to put God outside the universe. It's transcendent to the universe kind of thing. So God's sort of always being put somewhere that we can't find him. This isn't surprising, Richard. It's because, you know, we look into the universe and we don't observe any God. It has to be put outside of it.
What I find interesting is this idea, and it's very modern, because I believe that the ancient Jews believed that the realm the gods existed in was right here next to us. Like we would now describe as another dimension. So it's here, but we can't experience it. Now it's almost like the literal sky is heaven. And this idea of Jesus floating upwards into the sky is really bizarre, because Christians will claim that heaven's not up there and it's here, it's everywhere. So why didn't Jesus just dematerialize?
Right. Why go
Why
to
did he
toward a
literally
direction
float
at all?
up? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
He needed to
to
run
me,
up to 88
Heaven
miles
used to
an
be
hour.
right up there.
the Back to the Future reference, Mark, is good.
I mean, heaven used to be
I-
right up there, but then we got telescopes and shit, you know, and we
Right.
figured that out
Yeah.
fairly quickly. You know,
I think
I
heaven
was gonna
poses
say-
I think heaven poses major problems for Christianity, honestly.
Well, but
So do
like
I.
Mark was talking about, when they retreat back into whatever it is, and now it I think the majority of its philosophy, for most of them, right? Not a lot of the people on the YouTube, but most Christians that I know, it gets into some sort of philosophy, even if they don't know philosophy, they're getting into, because those questions most Christians look at that and say, oh, well, it's just a sign of the times, or, you know, this is the way they wrote back then, or whatever. It's an allegory to the story of Jesus, right? Like, it would make sense if he vanished, but back then they say this, and to them it appeared like he was going into the sky while disintegrating, or whatever that is. But I think it all fits into Mark's box of them retreating, right? Because it's always forever changing. And Mark, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson was the one that first said it that resonated with me. Like, Christianity is constantly retreating as we gain more knowledge, and it started with, like, you know, Thor. What was
I think
it?
there's a better claim to make.
Yeah.
Christianity is false.
oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I think it's retreating rapidly, because like this notion that heaven was
I think
right
it's
up
false.
there. I mean, it's actually a rather new notion that heaven isn't right up there. Like, we've been gathering evidence for a long time, but the culmination of all of that evidence is still rather new. The modern era is still rather new. My grandmother used to speak of God right up there looking down at you. If you blaspheme, you'll be struck with lightning. Like, you know, like she literally thought heaven
Played
was
with
right up
yourself.
there, because the space age was still really new to her. You know, like, all of that stuff was really new, but we know so much more now. You know, speaking of Neil deGrasse Tyson, I've been watching Cosmos, and he talks about how we have the technology to build a solar telescope, but, you know, you're going to have nations coming together and gathering resources. We need to be in a better place.
What?
A solar telescope, a telescope
What's
that
that
can
mean?
see across the entire fucking universe, man. It's basically using our sun as
Wait, hold on, but not. You're saying
it's
that
basically
humans
using our
need-
sun as the reverse side lens, right?
You're saying that in order for humans to have cool things, we need to be much more cooperative and collective about how we go about organizing and operating our societies. Oh,
That's how we
what
get
a
most cool
fucking
stuff.
Get rid of boundaries,
thought.
stop othering, and start seeing humans as humans and working together as human beings instead of individual nations.
Amen.
Yeah. So, and this is the point that I make a lot, actually, and I'll bring it up again, that, like, our understanding of what we know now is that we're on a spinning sort of mote of rock in the most hostile environment we've ever encountered, and there's people still fighting among themselves over who has the sort of best imaginary friend kind of thing. Like it's patently ridiculous to my mind, and this whole idea, I don't share this idea that there's going to be a God that's going to save us if something happens. So it's very strange to me that with all of these asteroids hitting us and missing us, and solar flares and the reversal of Earth's magnetic field, there's going to be some kind of
Climate change.
there's going to be some kind of supernatural being that's going to leap out and suddenly save all of us.
Have you heard
it's
claim
weird.
that
I don't.
and I imagine
Hey,
this
Sammy.
is very American. Yeah.
Just before Mark, I think it's because they're scared and that God helps them. It helps a lot of people that actually, or most people that acknowledge how terrifying that can be, us going through the universe. They hold on to that God because it's the only thing that can save them. It's what helps them go to sleep at night. It gives them that hope, meaning, purpose. Whereas the rest of us are like, holy shit, right? Like an asteroid's gonna fucking hit us and we're all gone. There, well, Richard.
Yeah, but
sorry,
I
Richard.
don't have that fear. I don't have that fear. It's just we either come together and ensure our own survival as humans, or we don't. And maybe if we don't, we're not going to survive. And that's
Mark,
evolution for you, right?
I think it's either of two things. Like natural selection is going to go one of two ways. Either we're gonna murder more, we're going to be more greedy, we're going to be more individualized and about the individual, or we're going to evolve to something like a communism, a universal knowledge of trying to work together to achieve great things. I tend to, I'm a pessimist when it comes to humanity. I think that we're going to kill each other off. I give us 200 years, but I hope I'm wrong.
I did want to say quickly to Mark, no pun intended, but I'm going to make a Marxist out of you yet.
Right. I like that I'm not great on economics, Leo. So
It's not about whether you're great on things. That has nothing to do with it.
I don't think our species is ready for communism. We're just not.
No, we're not. We do not live under productive forces that could furnish such a mode of social organization.
I think we're going to have to evolve as human beings and society. It's an
idea.
Before we go down that path, can I ask? I forget who was making the point, but this idea that I think comes from a group of American astronauts that have suggested that all presidents, and I think all world leaders actually, should be flown to space, because astronauts have this profound experience when they look back at the globe of oneness, and this idea that we need to stop being countries and think people against each other, and remain countries but start working together, because you see the fragility of the earth when you can actually see the earth.
Yeah.
But down here in the midst of it, yeah.
I was just going to say you're touching on such a deeper point, which is a good thing, but I love it.
Yeah.
You don't think Bush Jr. would have come back? Bush Jr. would have come back from that trip and be like,
I saw so much
Jesus.
Oil in so many places we could take democracy to.
No, he would have attributed it all to Jesus. It was like, I've seen God's greater gift to us, and I want to, like, that's my point being is simply like they will fit anything into that Christian box because it gives them that hope. And Mark, I totally agree with you, but that doesn't take away from those of us that are anxious about death or anxious about living on a rock spinning or just life in general, right?
Yeah.
And for the majority of the world,
myself. Yeah, I was only speaking for myself and what I feel. That's all. I wasn't trying to. Sorry, Sammy, just one thing, because I want to make this clear. I wasn't trying to say, hey, there's no reason to be scared kind of thing. I certainly wasn't saying that. My personal belief is either we survive and move on, or we don't, and natural selection has done its job. That's all.
Right.
That's how I
get that.
It. But that's just my personal, perspective. So I'm not trying to push that on you or anything.
Well, it's like 99.
Just to clarify the idea that these astronauts are trying to make is that they come back and it doesn't matter about your belief. Have your belief. It's that you realize that there's going to be a big rock coming, And instead of doing all this bullshit that we're doing down here, we should be trying to figure out how to shoot a big rock out of the fucking sky. We should be trying to figure out how to get onto another planet. We should be working together to do all these things, instead of doing all of this, you know.
Can I touch on that for a second? Because I think Sammy's really sort of like alluding to a really something I think is actually quite important, and something I think is directly observable, is that he said that, you know, if we could get, you know, presidents, I'm gonna extend it to all, like, just broadly to people, if we could get a lot of people up into space to look at the planet and see it like that, I do think that things like bigotry and xenophobia would actually be decreased. And I think that there's a historical precedent that establishes this. As human society has grown more globalized, more interconnected, it has grown more multicultural and more diverse, and barriers have been knocked down, and society has grown much more open-minded and much more progressive. And we're seeing that play out today even. And I think that this has largely been a result of us broadening our horizons, being able to see more, travel to different places, see different things, and gain different perspectives. And I think that when human society evolves to the point that people will regularly be able to take trips into space, will regularly be able to see Earth as a singular planet, I do think that it is going to continue to play a role in the slow deterioration of things like bigotry, xenophobia, and tribalism that currently exist in human society, as more and more and more of us, as a result of our technological advancement, realize our place in reality and realize how close we are to one another and how close we need to be to one another in order for our species to maintain any sense of meaningful existence in this reality.
Amen.
Leo,
And
I
I'd
think
just like to add quickly, if you want to like send flat earthers up to have a look, I'm all for it. Like all for it.
Yes.
And I do just quickly, I do want to push back on the idea just because if someone believes in a god, because a lot of those astronauts were religious people, and they still had this sense of one planet kind of thing when they came back down, even though they were religious. I don't. So here's the thing, and this might be contentious. I don't care if you believe in a god, if you're going to do what's in the best interest for humanity. As long as you're doing that, that's something, you know. I personally don't believe in religion. I think religion does a lot of harmful things, but as to individual beliefs, I don't have the right to tell you what to believe. If you believe in a god and you're doing everything for humanity, which I believe in, that's enough for me.
The problem, Mark, is most of them don't, and I think most of our leaders would have some stake in the game, because I think Leo makes the brilliant point, and we see this locally, right? Like America's full of terrible fucking people, and when you ask them if they've once they start pitching like the border, there's a fucking rape train coming to the U.S. from Mexico, or you know, all of the secular companies, all of the secular countries overseas are terrible places, or whatever bullshit they're spinning, and you ask them, oh, well, you've been to Mexico? Nope. Oh, you've been to Europe? Nope. Where have you been outside of the U.S.? And typically the answer is absolutely fucking nowhere.
I ain't never been 50 miles of some hometown of 2,500 people.
Right. We lived in Europe I was lucky enough to travel, and a friend of I were talking, and he's doing his damnedest to get his kids to travel, because even though he may lean a little bit on the conservative side, the rhetoric and the bullshit that the politics in America are spinning typically are because people are uneducated, ignorant, and have never been outside of this country, and they believe everything that's being told to them. So they can't even wrap their head around what Mexico's really like, or what
I want to jump in on this real quick.
Sweden, like it's a war zone, and Sweden is not a war zone, right? Sweden's
beautiful.
I would say
After knock, I want to clarify a point quick. Go ahead, Knock.
I would say like most people that go to space are probably going to have the experience that's being talked about, but not most politicians. Democrats will go to space; they'd have the experience. They'll have the experience. Democrats will come back and they'll talk about that experience, and then they'll go and they'll lobby to their corporate owners. Republicans, they'll have that experience, and then they'll come back and they'll lobby to their corporate owners and go out and play the social war game. And in my opinion, 99% of species have gone extinct, and we're going to go extinct as well. The more we play our games with biological warfare, creating these super diseases, nature itself's a bitch, and then you add on human beings trying to tamper with it. I see ours. I give us 200 years. Like I would, if I could live long enough to take the bets, I would.
Do you
I would
agree
take
though
200
that that's why it's important we
I
get off,
don't.
work together to get off the planet?
Well,
I think
to
we're
be
all
able
going to
to solve
fucking
these
kill each
things.
other.
Can I clarify?
Yeah, Leo did want to say
Point.
something.
Um,
Go, Leo.
to MDU, I'm just gonna call you MDU, so I don't have to say my darkened understanding every single time. And I do think there are terrible
Hey,
people.
Leo,
Have a
This-
short
Sean-
name.
Sean works.
What? Oh, okay.
Sean
Yeah, I'll just call you
works.
Sean. That works.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that-
sure.
that
Um,
works.
I do think there are terrible people in the United States and others. I don't think the problems with human society are terrible people. I'm going to say that the problems are largely rooted in the material interests of a particular class of individuals that is very, very small and yet disproportionately Jesus fucking Christ, disproportionately,
Much
excuse
you
my
meant,
autistic brain, and that are disproportionately and hold what I would argue is an immoral amount of power and control over society, and that it is merely in their material interests, informed by the material conditions under which they live, that they influence the social systems, the broad social systems that we live under, in ways that maintain their wealth, their power, and thereby their control. And this comes, as we can see now and throughout most of human history, to the detriment of our societies broadly. And it doesn't seem to be until the working classes, the lower classes, the laborer classes ultimately achieve class consciousness and rise up against the ownership class that any change is ever made. And I think history bears that out.
Amen.
Hey, one thing, and I'll let you guys go. Leo, I agree, but you touch on something to me that's very important. When I talk to people that are anti-trans or homophobic or any of these things, they don't have gay friends, they don't have trans friends, they don't have autistic
Exactly.
friends, they don't have any of these friends. And however, and maybe we're saying the same thing, but that's for me, that's a big thing, right? Like, people need to get out and see the world more. They need to spend time with people. Working in a restaurant for 30 years, you're forced into this community of wonderful people of all shapes, sizes, creeds, colors, sexes, anything you can imagine, and you learn to, like, this is why people think cities are so terrible, or like the where I live, they think cities are like this socialist fucking,
Cesspool.
sewer,
Yep.
right, cesspool. And it's because they've lived next to the same
Damn
like-minded person.
wokists.
For them, right? They've
Yeah.
never lived next to a fucking gay Hindu guy that worked next to them for 2 years. So they just don't know these people. And what your point hit home with me is, like, travel, right? Like, getting out, like getting to space is obviously excessive in that sense, or an extreme, I guess. But people don't even get out of the U.S., much less, like Mark said, they think Sweden or these socialist fucking countries. But if you go to one of
Not
these
even
socialist
remotely
countries
socialist.
that they think, they're the
It's
most
not.
beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, right? Like, when you go to Bavaria in Germany, or you go to we lived in Bavaria, that's just beautiful to me. But if you're lucky enough to go to any of, like, the secular countries, or just get out in the world and see the people that live in these, maybe you come back and go, I don't agree with, like, some of this, but you no longer going, socialism is, Biden selling socialism, or maybe it just kind of, like, takes the edge off of what you. I don't
Well,
know.
it also
Go to
helps if you understand
Amsterdam's
what
amazing.
socialism is.
Amsterdam's incredible.
I always wanted to go to Amsterdam. I never made it, Mark. But just
It's
Europe
insane.
in
Like,
general.
everybody rides bikes there. Like, bikes have
Yeah.
their own lane. Their system is amazing. Like, there's barely a car on the road. It's incredible.
Oh, so you mean they didn't just take the shoulder of the road and paint a bicycle symbol on it like we did in Australia, mate?
No, yeah.
Where the bicycles have to ride over
Their
all the
bike lanes
debris.
have their own lane, their own lights, kind of thing. And if you walk on their bicycle lane, they will get so mad at you. Like, that's a mistake you only make once. You walk on the bicycle lane. It would be like somebody walking in the middle of the street. It's like, what are you doing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Get out of the
another.
street.
The last thing I will say for a bit is this: that all these people that are so fucking anti-public transportation, I guarantee most of them have never been to Europe and seen. And Europe's what I've experienced. I know there are other countries with great public, but the train system over there, you can buy a Euro pass for like $200 and go anywhere and everywhere at all times
Yep.
of the day and night and whatnot. I just think the United States is terrible in the sense, Leo. It's not necessarily the terrible people, but we're just
Oh no, our infrastructure is absolutely horrid. But that's just
they don't know what they're
Well-
talking about because they've never experienced public transportation. They've
Well, of
never
course,
You should see the
experienced
public
the
transport
people.
system in Japan. You've never seen anything like the public transport system in Japan. It is insanely good. Like in Japan, I'd never seen a train arrive more than like a couple of minutes late. Like seriously, like it was always on time. And the like you look at the train poster of the map kind of thing, and it looks like a plate of spaghetti. It is, you can get anywhere on this thing, and just like the way they run it is like clockwork. It's insanely good. And that's
So
not
one thing
even
I
to
want-
mention like the Shinkansen, the bullet trains and stuff. They are incredible. You can get across the entire country in like an hour. It's so good. Sorry, go ahead, Leo.
The thing I wanted to mention is that the social progress of human society is largely due to the continued social progress of human society as we have grown significantly more interconnected. I think that that's an immediately derivable prediction from Marxism out of out of historical materialism and things like that. But also, I think that the stagnation that we're seeing in terms of research and development and continued economic production, not just in the United States, but in many places in the world, is also something that is directly predicted by Marxism, particularly from the labor theory of value. So, I mean, a lot of what we see in society, the reason I'm a Marxist is because I think it provides a legitimate analytic methodology that directly produces a lot of the things that we see as novel predictions as a result of the ways that our societies are broadly structured and organized.
So my problem with communism and socialism in general.
I didn't
is
say
that
communism or socialism. I said Marxism.
I'm just saying in general. Okay, so Marxism and communism and socialism in general, as a general basis, is that I worry about how free market competition is going to affect innovation, because I know that competition does drive innovation. It has to. And without that free market competition, I worry, where does the drive for innovation come from?
So the first thing I want to say, because I do think it is a very important distinction to make, is that one can be a Marxist without being a socialist or a communist. I don't think that they can really be broadly grouped together. I think that in and of themselves, there's a classification between them. But that's neither here nor there ultimately. With respect to free market, I don't think that free markets are largely what incentivize humans, and I don't think that if we look back at human history that's borne out. I think that humans consistently innovate. Now, to get a little bit more technical, what I would say is I think that the innovation that humans see isn't a result of like ideas that people have so much as it is a result of the productive forces that humans live under. The technological advancements that humans see is a result of the productive forces that humans live under. We can't technologically advance past what the productive forces that we live under are capable of. This is why if you go back to like how people in the 1830s and 40s looked at the future, you get what we now know as an anachronistic and highly popular what's the word? Not identity thing, I guess you could say, known as steampunk, because they couldn't envision a future that we have today because they didn't live under the productive forces that furnish the kind of technology that we currently live under. They didn't know about it. They couldn't have thought about it. Humans are never. This is why we had slavery in human history. It's not because people thought slavery was good. It's because that's the mode of production that was best at the time, best capable of furnishing the continued development of human society. And then we moved into feudalism, and then into mercantilism, and now we exist under capitalism. And this notion of a free market exists under capitalism. But human society has progressed forward and innovated despite this. And I think that
Well-
it continues to do that in spite of it.
Well, and I'm not one to really argue for communist Russia because I don't think communist Russia was really communist. I think they tried at first, but they got away from Marx and they really got away from communism. But if you look at the economy of Russia right up to World War II, it was booming. It was one of the most booming economies in the world. And then World War II happened, and everybody knows what happened to Russia during World War II. The country was freaking just destroyed.
It was raped by Germany for its resources, which was what Hitler's
decimated.
plan was. Like a lot of
And
people don't
after that,
realize,
their economy didn't really recover.
yeah, a lot of people don't realize that
So-
the recent. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, well, I wanted to ask, so something like the competition that we saw during the 80s and 90s, sort of Microsoft versus Apple, that sort of drove a lot of innovations coming out from both sides, like it's not like just Apple was the only one doing innovation there. Do you see that happening without that competitive force?
Well, what I would say is that the competitive force does not depend on a capitalist mode of production specifically.
Yeah, I think it's definitely
And
still. what
I would
happened.
argue further that the capitalist mode of production, I think, particularly in this is a very, very cliche term, and I really don't like to use it, but I don't know what term better characterizes it. Particularly in a late stage capitalism that has continued to exist and evolve in human society for well over 100 years. We're at about the 125. Well, actually, we're probably close to the 300-year mark, 250 with capitalism. Anyway, that in late stage capitalism, competition is actually hindered. And that I would argue that that's a result of the continued monopolization, that the tendency for capital to monopolize as a secular trend, and as a result of the, I think
So
that's
are you
probably
sort of
going to derive
arguing
from that.
that innovation is stifled unless it has a purpose that fits within the capitalism paradigm kind of thing? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that capitalists, once they have monopolized an industry, well, in virtue of the profit motive, capitalists of sufficient economic control will seek to purchase off their competition to eliminate them so that they can capture control over the market and charge whatever prices they seek in virtue of there being no competition to challenge the prices they set. And I think that we saw this happen in the late 1800s and early 1900s with mining, steel, the railroads, all that stuff. I think we're seeing it happen today again with railroads, with technology, with fossil fuels, and a variety of other industries.
But whether or not they monopolize is completely separate point to whether that innovation is propagated to the larger society or not. And I could make the argument that because you can enable larger companies to take over smaller ones, they have a better way to propagate that technology throughout the world than the smaller company. So I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It can be. Absolutely, monopolies can be bad.
Sure.
But that's a different point than innovation.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think a larger company that purchases its competition and continues to manufacture a commodity is probably going to be more capable of distributing that commodity to those who are willing to purchase it. I would not, I wouldn't deny that. I almost said decline that. My brain is wanting to be weird right now. But
What do you mean now?
I don't. What's that?
What do you
Never
mean
mind.
now?
Just like
No, it's a joke.
don't
I'm
ask.
joking, Leo.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you said like you cut out or something like that. My bad.
Okay, while there's a short pause, let me take that pause to say, if anyone wants to open a stream so that this conversation can continue, please feel free. I'll make you a moderator. You can post it, etc., etc. Go ahead and continue, guys, but my brain's shutting down.
Okay, no worries. Well, I wasn't going to continue on for much longer anyway. I feel out of my element when it comes to economic systems, but I'd like to know what you're talking about with the stifling of innovation, or capitalism stifling innovation. I really want to get it. Because monopolies don't stifle innovation; they kind of no doubt they consolidate all of those things in one. Like, I used to work for a company we used to call the Borg, right? Like they would take over anything and assimilate it. But the whole point is they're assimilating it. The innovation, they would capture innovative things, but they would develop those. So I'm wondering where the stifling comes from.
Well, so what I would say is that what I think we can expect as the capitalist mode of production evolves in time is that as capital not only centralizes into fewer and fewer hands, but monopolizes control over industries and becomes effectively cartels, that what we will see is a shutdown of development. What the fuck is that? I got a piece of hair on my glasses. I can't see. That they will stifle. They will stifle innovation by shutting down the newer firms that which need the investment to continue to produce the innovation. And I think that we see this today. I think this is why we have not seen the fossil fuel industries largely move toward nuclear power or hydroelectric or solar in any meaningful sense. I think this is why we haven't seen a large electrification of rail transportation, at least here in the United States. I think this is why we haven't seen a major investment in updating the infrastructure, our public infrastructure, at least here in the United States. And I think that this is because the short-term profit that can be made through these firms for its owners is what they are more concerned with than long-term investments that foster longer-term profits, even if they're less over time. They're short-sighted and driven by the profit motive.
Hey
Well,
guys,
that's
can I interrupt
true.
can I interrupt 1 second, Mark? Because I think
Yeah, Sean.
I think
yeah, good.
I think being on Richard's stream, I think I would love to hear your specifically, Mark, and Leo's biggest pushback to Richard's Space Jesus. Like, look, I mean, obviously Richard's gonna fucking cut this stream off
Oh.
in a couple minutes if you guys
Nope,
run
just
down
right
this,
now.
run.
Just kidding.
Well, and look, I mean, so the economics is fascinating, but I think with his like congratulations stream, I really would like to hear you
That's
guys
true.
push back, because you guys talk to so many Christians, and we all listen to you, we all go on your stream and watch you guys push back towards Christians. And then kind of when we're on Richard's stream, everybody kind of like just hangs out because we all like Richard, right? It's hard to.
I've pushed back against Richard. Like if you do look, I've
So have
pushed Richard
I.
pretty hard. Actually.
Well, being his
Hard as a
570, being his 575 mark, maybe we could do a round robin of everybody's best argument against Space Jesus. How about that, Richard? Would that make
That's
you
a
happy?
good idea.
That's lovely.
That way you can engage a little bit too.
Oh.
Who wants to start?
That's very sweet. I think my dark and understanding should start.
Oh
It's
no,
your idea.
not a
I
chance.
can start.
Not-
I can start.
Yeah.
I can definitely start. So
Go on,
my
Mark.
latest problem with Richard's thing is the idea that heaven is somehow a copying of people's consciousness to another body, which is what I correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Richard, because this was a
Oh,
question.
you're just
I
starting
found
the explanation. You're fine.
Okay. So,
going down
and you
my
said
rabbit hole?
that the people that won't be transmitted to this heaven-like state in a body elsewhere were people with sort of mental illness or sort of incurable mental conditions. Is that correct? I guess my problem with that is, number one, that people with incurable mental conditions sort of, it's not really their fault, so it seems a bit unfair. And because your thing is naturalistic, that may not be a problem, sort of because it's naturalistic. They can decide to do whatever they want. That's fair. My other one is that a alien species with a technology able to transfer consciousness would have no problem in curing a mental condition that those people would have. So that's
interesting.
The latest grievance I've had with the whole idea.
That's super interesting. No, from what I can understand of the text, the reason that children tend to follow their mom is because they're mentally junior to their parent on average, and the same kind of idea is extended to people who have less than average mental operations, from what I can tell. But I think testimony is individualized to the person that's being given to. So I don't think that sort of. You may be talking about the times that I've said it's a very specific kind of crazy that would refuse heaven when it's right there in their face. Is that what you're talking about?
No, we had a long conversation on salvation, sort of a soteriology from your point of view, and that sort of everybody would be saved, but you designated sort of
That's what I think. Yeah.
the worst sort of mentally impaired sort of psychopaths and sort of thing that were mentally impaired. But if a alien species is able to transfer a consciousness, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to cure any neurological or psychological problem.
I think the differentiation is that, and I've presented this as an argument against Christianity several times to several Christians, which you're not a Christian, so I never presented it to you. That if you, let's say you were a doctor and you had a pill that cured every kind of cancer, and you could make it cheap. Who is suffering from cancer who shouldn't get your pill? It's something like that. You would refuse no one. You know what I'm saying? Right. And I think that's the case of heaven, that there is no refusal. Which the only thing that would keep you from going is that if you refuse and you're mentally sound, which seems impossible almost.
Richard, is there anybody that like, because what you've described, sort of, is there anybody that would want salvation but they don't get it?
Oh, not as far as I can tell, no.
Not as far as you can tell. So, but if say I said, no, I'm not going to take this, but I'm generally a good person, they would just accede to that, basically.
If they assessed you as being, able to make such a decision, then I think there's some respect there of a person's wishes.
Okay. All right, maybe I got the wrong end of it there, but yeah. So even people.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but to answer Mark specifically, there will be people that stay behind because they don't want to go, and they won't be forced.
It's a very, very small number according to the story. It's if you did it based on today's population, like it happened today, those who stay too long and the Earth gets destroyed, they get destroyed with it. Is 1 out of 264 plus 1,000 people. So
in your sort of system, you could be the worst mass murderer in the history of humanity.
Sure.
And as long as you wanted to go, they'd take you.
Sure.
Okay.
Or anything else, that wouldn't matter because I mean, and the conversation comes full circle because Hitler wouldn't be Hitler in heaven. Hitler would be the being who used to be Hitler.
So they would change you. They would change.
Well, whatever's wrong with his brain where he hates humans for no evident reason that I understand, and please don't start explaining it to me. But that could be repaired.
That's fine. Okay. So what if you want to go, but you don't want to be repaired? Like you want to stay the same person you always were.
Don't drink the water and don't eat the food. I don't think that's an option.
That's not an option. So we get to change you into somebody else, or you die.
No, we get to change you into what you were genetically meant to be, without any defects, without any birth defects, or you die.
Wow! All right.
Can I ask one question?
I mean,
Sure,
you mean two?
Just as a general
because
question.
That was a question. So now you're working on a second one, or you're done.
Huh?
You already asked a question. Could I ask one question? In which case, you're done. Next person. I'm just kidding,
go,
Leo. Say
Ignore
it.
him. Just go, Leo.
And this is just a discussion just for general, or like a question just for general discussion, not even necessarily a target like Richard or anybody like that. But why not heaven now?
Why not?
Why create a universe? Why go through all of this? Why allow for sin? Why all of this? Why didn't God just create us all with Him in heaven in a relationship where there is no sin? Why not heaven now?
I'll give you the short answer. You're going to object to it, but it's a 3-hour conversation I'd love to have with you sometime. Okay, Leo? Here's the short answer. A very tiny percentage of, because human nature is carried into that heaven, those spaceships, a very, very tiny percentage needs to understand suffering in a very, very real way so that to maintain that utopian society of human beings.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
I don't really have any issues with Richard's Space Jesus. I became the Raging Atheist so I could meet Richard and do a case study on him and turn his theology into a 6-season blockbuster on HBO.
Right on.
Okay.
It's going to be a great. It's going to be a great. I've already designed
wanna
a
write the
stage
book.
play.
We're gonna kick Game of Thrones ass, Richard. We're gonna do it.
Right
I'll
on.
write the book.
Nice.
I'll write
Right
the
on.
book. I'm not going to do the screen adaptation.
I did design in my mind at least and make some notes to the idea of David and Goliath as the interstellar bodies done as a stage play where above the actors they have a large 45-degree mirror so that the entirety of the audience can see them from above, and then their hats, although at this angle, look like just really big. What was that Whoopi Goldberg character on Star Trek? Just one of
Gaia.
those real, just Gaia. It looked
Yeah,
like a
Gaia.
Gaia hat, but actually, when you look at it from the top, it's the planets. And then they could literally do the story, and it would perform the miracles. Anyway, next.
So Richard, yeah. Well, two things. One, I worked at this restaurant. They had a mirror above one of the main dining room tables that was like 10 feet long. The table was about 10 feet long, and they called it the slab.
Okay.
Nobody
That
wants
sounds
to talk about
horrible.
that. Oh,
I mean,
Mark,
why
it
would you want a
was,
bird's eye view of somebody eating? Like, seriously, I
had
don't.
had nothing to do with food, brother. The mirrors in
I
the
just got
bathrooms
done
came
eating
off
some
the
food.
wall. It was
Huh?
so it was anyway. It's a bad anyway. This
Slab,
restaurant was,
not to do with food.
yeah. Once it closed down, like literally the mirrors came off the bathroom walls. The restaurant turned into like this, just like I don't know. It was back in the
Strip club.
'80s. Yeah, lots of cocaine, lots of sex
Can you
on
go like
tables,
this?
mirrors of.
Thank you.
But anyway, Richard, this seems like what we talked about the other night with if they are these intelligent beings, wouldn't they be able to do it without having to demonstrate like all the suffering to people? Couldn't they find a better way to do it? It's like when we talked about if the book really is a message for one single person, couldn't they find a better way to do this? It seems like
Well, are the
you're
beings
so
morally
tied-
perfect? I mean, if Richard doesn't think that the beings are morally perfect, I don't think the argument's going to get through.
I do think they're morally perfect for what we need in a very unselfish way. And now I can't always justify everything that a human being is because I don't even know what a human being. I don't think we know what a human being is. But I can say so much as their claim is this is the perfect scenario for a limited time offer.
Yeah, see, this is why you cannot run any traditional arguments against the existence of God. They're not going to work against Richard. Not going to happen.
Well, I think everyone agrees that my God exists, but if I'm speaking to a theist, they're going to tell me that that's not a God that I believe in, and I'm going to say in return to that I believe the Father in heaven you would call an atheist. He doesn't believe in supernatural blah 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 either.
Right.
That makes
And I mean,
sense,
the only other sort of the main objection I would have is that we don't really have any solid evidence pointing to your conclusion as a conclusion.
Right.
I mean, there's so many different ways you can interpret the Bible, and to me, yours is just one of a great many that could be. Like, don't get me wrong, you can interpret it that way, absolutely, but I could interpret it as sort of multi-dimensional fairies or gremlins or just about anything. If you're willing to use a sort of bias system, you can get to anything from that book.
Yeah, sure, and people do.
Sure. But
Absolutely.
you're saying you don't. That's
No.
the thing that I sort of say.
I'm saying that you can't prove the future, and we'll have to wait.
Well, I have to
But-
definitely agree with that.
Richard also will admit that it is based in special revelation for him.
Right.
He
Right,
did receive
yeah.
this information. Yeah.
The only reason that I'm still using this is that it continues to work. It continues to apply and be at least internally consistent and not logically self-defeating. If it failed, I'd have to go, well, that was not a revelation from higher beings. That was I'm a lot more inventive than I thought I was, even though I had no evidence of that in my life. And I thought of some pretty cool stuff, and it worked for a time, and now it's failed, and I just have to abandon it. Which is the same way that I came to it in the first place. That more information made me change my mind. And I want to believe that I'm still open to that.
Well, like I said earlier, Richard, I don't have the right to tell anybody what to believe. As long as you're doing the best for humanity and the best thing I see morally, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter. We're all working together kind of thing. Do I really care about the motivation of the person that's helping me on the side of the road or something? No, of course I don't. If they want to believe that God commanded them to do it, I'm just going to be thankful for the help, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am cognizant that sort of incorrect beliefs can lead you down, horrible roads. And I guarantee if I think that's happening, Richard, I will tell you. But, for the most part, I don't have a problem. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, beliefs can lead you down some wrong paths, and that applies to everybody, me included. So, yeah.
So far, since it applies only to the future, other than the assertion that it's great technology that's become a religion, even though they knew that would happen, that wasn't their intent. Is that it was to be like this superstitious. Thanks
Bye,
for all your
Leo.
input, Leo. Thanks for coming
See
by.
you, Leo.
Sorry, and I just want to say, despite the spiciness at the beginning, no, I don't hate anybody here. They're not stupid. They didn't make dumb points. That just because there were some comments
We
made
love
in the
you,
chat
Leo.
by some people, and it's like, no, please stop. I love these
How about
people. They're not
severely
bad. They're not dumb.
dislike?
They're not stupid.
You said you don't hate, but you said
Oh no,
you
I
don't
like
hate
these
anyone. How about
people. I love these people.
Oh,
They're
you
great
like them?
people.
Okay,
Yes.
that's great.
I
Glad to hear it.
resent their existence.
We love you too.
But I love them. Yeah.
Anyways,
See you
please
later.
take it easy. Thanks for having me,
See
Richard.
you,
Much
man.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Peace out,
Thanks for
everybody.
Coming by.
Have a good night, Leo.
Tell me
Yeah,
when it's
so-
my turn, Richard.
It's your turn, Richard.
Awesome. Well,
Well,
thank you.
So it leads me to sort of ask, and maybe this is sort of off the cuff, but where does your moral foundation come from? then?
Oh, well, let me ask my question. 'Cause
Oh,
that's-
sure.
that's
Sorry.
good.
Go ahead, Sammy.
So, this is my latest thing with Richard, and forgive me, Richard, if we've had the discussion and we came to some conclusion. A lot of my discussions happen at 2-3 a.m. in the morning. So, my thing, as you know, Richard, is we could boil it down roughly to the problem of evil or suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I still haven't got around the explanation for the need of suffering. I think we were kind of getting there, like this idea without the opposite of something, we can't know something. But then I can think of examples where that happens. So
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so here's my idea on it. All of this is hard to show because we're talking about human psychology. I think there is something to be differentiated between empathy and experience, and I think that if I have the same experience as you, I understand the same kind of suffering that you and I both have had in a different way than just me knowing about the suffering of someone else and not having experienced it. And
I
I think as
disagree.
long as
Yeah.
there's going to be repeating earths, there's going to be suffering, both
So-
natural suffering and caused suffering. You know, things we do and things the planet does to us. And I
So-
know nobody likes that answer.
Well, this, I think I get it. It's not so much a suffering thing, but just an experiential thing. This idea that I could see my parents be parents, I could see other people be parents, and try and empathize that. But until I became a parent, there's things I could not have ever known,
And that's apparent.
and that's apparent. So there's a part of suffering that we cannot know without experience.
Right.
I
That's what I
think
think
that-
anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, empathy kind of is a projection. It's sort of you can take experiences in your life and sort of when you empathize with somebody, you kind of flesh it out. You say, "Hey, how would I feel in this situation?" I don't think that's necessarily reliant on experience,
But you just said
I guess
that was the first premise. You said we draw from our experiences.
sure, but I don't think you need
That's the
that
key.
exact experience in order to empathize with somebody. Like, you don't need to be a parent in order to empathize that parenting is a lot of hard work. You have been under hard work before, and you understand what that entails, and you can project that. You can sort of
Sure.
understand that from an outside
But don't we end
point
up
of
in
view.
some sort of a regress though?
What do you
Because
mean?
to understand this experience, we're drawing on our experiences, but we had to experience those lesser sufferings, let's say, to imagine there's greater suffering. Well, we still have suffering. We haven't explained.
Yeah, but,
you know what I
but
mean?
that then it begs the question of why ongoing suffering? Why is it sort of not just, a year or something and then we're taken up to heaven? Why do we have to flesh this out? Sometimes with, the most horrible of conditions and the most horrible of stories kind of thing. And it also begs the question of why does one person who is a good person that treats others kindly suffer, and another person who is a horrible person that is selfish and takes a lot from society? Why do they get rich and have a relatively comfortable life in comparison to the good
I think it's not
person?
supposed to be fair. I think by design and by default, it's not fair.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, like an alien species can be not fair if they want. That's fine. But then where does your morality
Which
come
brings you back
from?
to the other question.
Right.
I think
so
morality is based in what the human animal objectively is, which I have hints about, and I don't have a perfect definition of, but I think they do have a perfect definition of what a human being is. And interestingly enough, the spiritual text of the Bible only covers angels who are assigned to interact with an earth, which is why that God rests when the earth is collected, and it's not effective for whatever time until there's another earth collected. So that's not even a description of God. And as far as like what rules heaven and what do angels follow, there is mention of a book that upon entry into heaven is already opened. My theory is hard to show, but my theory is it's truth of the universe, which we don't have, truths we don't have right now.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Richard. I think
Go
you
ahead.
may have misunderstood me. I'm not talking about where their morality comes from. I'm talking about where our morality comes from.
I love you,
Like,
and I should treat you well.
well, that's not a foundation for a moral system. So,
Why
so
not?
you sort of said, well, it's not supposed to be fair. So, do you think things should be fair?
Well,
That
of course,
a
yeah. I think
person-
they should be
Okay.
fair, because I'm a
So,
speciesist.
where does that come from?
I'm a speciesist.
You're a speciesist. Okay, so you're a humanist because you are human.
I'm a humanist. I prefer humans over like
Okay.
everything else.
So, do you think there is an objective morality to humanity, or is it just a social construct that we build between ourselves?
Okay, depending on the entailments of all that, I have no idea, but I think there is an objective thing that a human is, and that should guide what morality is.
So, sorry, excuse me. Here's the problem. You've got this alien race that's going to destroy the Earth. It's going to be wiped out anyway. But my consciousness is going to be taken to heaven, which is the transfer. And whatever happens to me on Earth, that will be taken away and repaired, basically. So there's nothing I can do that sort of says, you know, my you know, I'm going to damage myself by any actions that I perform. So why ought I not be greedy and selfish and make the best life for me that I can, knowing that that greediness and that self-centeredness will be corrected before I get there?
Oh, there's no reason why you shouldn't, except for your own personal morality.
Okay, so personal morality. I mean, morality. So you might.
So
talk
he's
about
agreeing there's no objective reality, correct?
There's no objective
subjective in
morality
the end.
pushed upon the populace. Only the hero has a pushed on him moral system.
So,
Hey guys, I gotta get to sleep, so I'll see you guys.
Yeah,
Great
sure.
seeing you, Knock.
later.
Thanks for dropping
Good
by.
night, Knock.
good to see you,
Thanks
mate.
for
Love you,
your
brother.
input, Knock.
So morality is applied
Night,
to groups, right? It's applied to communities and societies, kind of thing. Why, or groups of people like our species or whatever. It's what we ought to do within those groups. Like individuals have sort of ethical behaviors, whether it adheres to that or doesn't adhere to a moral system.
Okay.
But it seems like you're sort of almost implying, I'm not sure if you're saying this, but you're implying sort of a moral nihilism, that you can be moral within society, or you don't have to be.
Can I push back on that?
I
Sure,
think
Sam.
I think it's exactly what we're already seeing, that people do what they want.
That's what I was going to say.
And the only one predetermined is the one who's predetermined to be the hero of the story. He's got rules.
So, okay, so let's go through. I want to sort of share with you my moral system, where I see morals, because I'm a moral relativist, or rather a meta-ethical relativist. So what I basically am saying is that if we can agree on a framework, like a purpose, a direction, we can have a moral system that has objective things in virtue of whether we are achieving our goals.
Because you
or
have a
not
goal.
achieving our
Yeah,
goals.
right. Okay.
Because I have a goal, right? Because I
Right,
can
sure.
say, hey, the flourishing and well-being of humans, human society, and the human species is the goal. So
Okay.
whatever aims towards that is moral, and whatever doesn't aim towards that is immoral, right? So
Okay,
that's
sure.
how I work out what is good and bad as far as a moral system is concerned. If you don't want to adhere to the flourishing of society, that's great. Pick another society is my response usually. It's sort of like, look, we can't agree.
Become
that
a
humans
hermit.
are important.
Sure.
Go see Steading or whatever. I don't care. But, in order to fit into society, you've got to work for the betterment of humans and those humans around you. So that's where I place my morals. But
Okay.
the problem is with your system, it doesn't really matter whether human flourishment is your goal or not, because you're going to be rescued by the god, sort of species, and beamed to a different location where your well-being is assured. Is essentially what I'm saying, if that makes sense. So under how I look at morals, you've said, okay, well, the aiming towards flourishing doesn't matter. So I ask myself, under that system, why would I care if I'm contributing to the well-being of humans?
Okay, I can only answer for myself because that was a great question.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
But I think that you become an angel, and because of that, I want to respect you as if you already are, and I will,
Okay.
except for what exceptional times you don't act like that. And I might get frustrated at your unangelic behavior for some amount of time, but I'm going to try to let that go and go back to the idea that you are going to become an angel. But I think it's just fine whatever we do here, and that's not going to matter. But on the flip side of that same coin, as far as how you act and your interactions with other human beings, how you treat our environment, each other, yourself, then I would literally call those, when they're successful and cause flourishing, I would call those godly acts, even if you're irreligious.
But why are they godly?
Because they profit human, which is the whole
So-
idea.
So is the flourishing of humanity something that God has designated for us?
No,
No.
the flourishing of humanity is why they bothered to make heaven in the first place, and get us
God
off
is a
of
result.
is a result, not a. It's not a causation. It's a result of.
God, but Richard believes God is contingent on man.
Right?
Which is why
Okay.
there is no Yahweh in the text until Adam, and everything before that is Elohim. We're not
Okay,
contingent on
so-
God. God, we are the God makers, actually. I mean,
So-
not for the same reason, but we are the God makers.
So morally, I have a big problem with we're fine whatever we do here, which is your exact words.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're fine whatever we do here, because then there is no compulsion to behave in any way, whether immorally or morally,
Yes,
or
there is.
amorally. Well, and what's that?
Empathy.
Well, empathy isn't. I mean, there's one emotion that humans have biologically.
Well,
We
you can
also
even
have
take
a
the-
range-
You could also take the logical route. If I don't want to live in squalor and disgusting filth,
Yeah.
that and the people around me don't want to either, and all of us come together to keep our trash taken out, etc., not throw food rubbish into the streets, etc., then we'll have a nice place to live.
Right,
would
but I could be well,
correct
just
to
a sec,
say,
Sammy, because I
Richard,
didn't
that-
get
hang
to
on.
answer. So Sammy, mate, I've got to be able
Alright.
to answer, mate. I really do.
Go for it.
So that's a good concept and all, but I could be very selfish and sort of take from the poor and just sort of be very unfair, and I still wouldn't live in squalor. I would probably have a more comfortable life than I do right now. If I tricked people and basically was like Hovind and basically tricked people for my money, and I wouldn't see that as moral. But why is it immoral under your system?
Well,
Hey,
actually,
hubby.
it's not gonna matter much.
That's my
and
point.
yeah, it's not gonna matter much. What we
Yeah, that's my
do
point.
here. Well, I tell you what, the advantage is I get to see the real you.
Who's that an advantage for?
Me, the observer.
Sure, but why does that that doesn't sort of spur me to do anything moral?
No, it doesn't.
So-
It doesn't.
So what you're looking at is why are actions that that benefit me at the expense of others? Why
Yeah.
is that wrong?
It's not necessarily. I mean, if
Yeah,
we're
so
here to
that's
suffer,
my problem.
you're adding to the suffering, which makes you actually something that will be used later for good.
Well, I mean, that's fine, but that means that there's no reason why I shouldn't go around being completely
Oh, that's
selfish
what
and making
I
other
but I
people
answered
suffer.
that in the first place when you first said this. I said it's up to the individual's own moral system.
Sure, but do you understand that sort of if you do agree that human life is important and human flourishing is important in the system that I sort of outlined, you can't go around being selfish at the expense of others, because that does not cause humanity to flourish.
Right.
It doesn't-
I like
it's
I
against
personally
well-being.
I think your system that you described for yourself and what you value is a more godly system than the opposite one that you hypothesized.
So what do you mean by godly? Because God doesn't enter into my system in
It's
the
more-
slightest.
My definition of God does enter exactly into the as you described
Okay.
it, actually.
So
That
what
that
is
it's
that then?
that
What
that
makes
it's
it godly?
that it's first of all it's species centric and should be. That humans should be concerned with not just short term selfish, but long term smartly selfish. Um, I think that's a fine way to run morality.
So is so I'm not sure I understand. So God is something that was created by humans
Yes, it's
in
just
this thing.
it's just the thing that we need in a utopian society. It's part of our nature, I think, that people who can worship an entity, a living entity like that has personage, I think they force themselves to do that. I don't think that's in our nature at all. That it's
Okay.
it's only ideas of religion and tradition that make them do that. I personally never felt inclined to worship another living being my whole life. Uh, and that standard throughout all of those who are in that utopian spaceship society heaven, I think they look at it the same way. They don't worship a living being. They have a set of ideals that's in charge of their society that they all agree upon, and it's based in what a human animal is and what that human needs.
Okay. Okay. So by godly, you just mean human centric,
Humanitarian?
humanitarian. That's all you
Yeah.
mean.
That'd be about the same
Okay.
thing, yeah.
But do you think
Oh.
that's an objective thing, or do you think that's subjective because they
It's-
are part of humans?
As soon as we find out what the human animal is, it'll be objective.
Okay.
But it's purely subjective is the point because it's human centric.
Right.
Yeah, like if we were people from Andromeda, we're Andromedans, it'd probably be Andromedan centric, right? Like
Sure.
it's only perspective that makes it human centric. So I don't possibly understand how that could be objective.
To what a human is. It's not objective universally to all things. It wouldn't be, but why should it be?
Well, no, I mean, I don't think an objective morality exists. I'm a moral relativist.
That's fine. No, that makes sense
Yeah,
right now.
okay.
I probably mostly agree with most of that view right now in this situation
Okay.
as we see it.
Okay.
Would you say, Richard, something I need clarified? Would you say that God evolves with the angels?
God evolves with the angels. I think their environment is stable and they don't evolve.
Yeah, I just
You-
sort of it still worries me that there is no real reason why people shouldn't be selfish or small minded or cause suffering to others.
If you happen to live into end times, Mark, and you happen
Yeah.
to stick around too long because you're having trouble adjusting, and you happen to meet Jesus in the second half of end times, you should ask him. But
Okay,
I've run
sure.
out. I've done all
Yeah,
the
no
theory I
worries.
can.
No, I'm sorry, Richard. I don't mean to hammer you. This is just a
No.
fascinating
I
morality
enjoy
is
this,
one of my
and you make me think,
subjects
and you
that I
improve me, and I deeply appreciate that. I really do.
Well, maybe think of it and just sort of leaving the heaven part aside. What's our motivation to be to care about others' well-being?
That's personal, and everyone's different.
Hmm.
I mean, just being realistic.
Yeah,
What is the situation here? I could just describe it in really brief terms. There are people whose moral system you wouldn't agree with at all, and you would probably think they're completely immoral.
Yeah, so when we're talking morality, where there's two different things, there's sort of the description of morality, like what
Sure.
do people do when we see it. What I'm talking about is the normative. So what we ought to do in sort of an ideal world, right? So there's two sort of uses of morality here. I'm not sort of just describing what exists in the world. What I'm talking about is what we should do and the aims we should have for our societies and groups in general.
Sure.
So when I'm talking about my morality, I'm not just talking about the decisions that I make and everybody else is excluded. I'm talking normatively about it. So how we should treat each other in a very sort of in a perfect world, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, all right. You want to take heaven out of it, but I think heaven is the point of it. That there's very little statements about how the ascended into the spaceships treat each other. There's a few statements.
But I thought we were going to change
apparently
anyway,
they what's that?
Well,
But
we
you
were
asked
gonna
me about an
change
ideal.
anyway. Yeah. So ideally, how we should treat each other on Earth, like ideally.
I think it should go like this. We shouldn't get married because when feelings change, and feelings will change, you're going to have to deny your own feelings, or you're going to have to, I don't know, create an illusion for the other person in the relationship, and that just seems horrible either way.
Right.
If you fall in love with someone else,
Sure, then you break it up and get divorced. I don't see why you have to keep on the relationship.
no, I'm not saying you should keep on the relationship. I'm saying what people do here compared to what I think is being done there. That they don't make those kinds of commitments to each other. They're just either in love in that moment or they're not. That seems ideal for human beings. If you had a society that could work under that, just being honest with each other. It looks like they're big on counseling each other and talking about stuff. That
Sure.
seems to be a thing. I think that's good for what kind of animal we are too. That's about all that's covered, though.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to take off, but it's been really good to talk to you, Richard. I really enjoy
Thanks for
our
coming by,
discussion,
Mark.
so.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, and thanks to Sammy and Sean. Thanks for talking with me, guys.
Thank you,
No,
Mark.
it's great.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good
Oh,
night or
it's good.
day or wherever you are.
Yeah, you too, Mark.
Good to have another Aussie.
Have you ever had someone who wasn't an Aussie? I'm curious.
Oh, all the time.
Really? Is there like a big
Yeah,
tourism system
I-
over there? Or?
I had a Filipino just the other day.
Huh. Tourist? Stabilizing? Thinking about moving there?
No, already moved.
Already moved.
Yeah. We have a large portion of our nurses come from the Philippines.
Huh.
Why is that?
Because we have a really well paid. To Australians, it's not, but to someone from the Philippines, it's an awful lot of money, and they have found that Australian hospital systems love those nurses. I know that sounds racist to some people, whatever, but it's because their education system for nursing is much better than ours in Australia. Our
Oh.
nurses take 3 years, their nurses take 5, and which includes a year on the floor in all the different areas. So they come over much better ready to hit the ground running than our nurses.
And where they get the good education is not such good pay. So it treats them well to move. Awesome. Good for them. Good for the people who need medical services too, by the way.
Yes, that's right. They are excellent nurses, I have to say. So
Okay. Final thoughts and stuff. Wrapping it up.
Thanks for having me on, Richard. Tammy,
Thanks,
always
Sean.
nice to see you.
yeah, you too, mate.
Projects coming okay, Sean?
Oh, doors are delivered. Yes, thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab your email at some point, and once I get them to shoot me the pictures of after they're supposed to hang them, they've got to do.
I'd like
Anyway,
to see
long-
that.
I would too. So hopefully I get get them to shoot me a couple pictures, and I'll send them to you. I'm just literally painting these shelves as we speak, and then it's back to like my everyday for about 3 months, which I'm really excited. The custom stuff is it kind of grates on me because my shop's not really set up for that. It's set up to turn and do the small stuff that I take to festivals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway,
Well, I'd
yeah,
like to
thanks.
see him stained and hung. Yeah.
Me too, because I'm terrified. I textured that one ash door. They wanted to beat it up a little bit, and I textured it, and it looks good now. But I'm worried that when they stain it, I'm sure it'll look good. But you know how that goes. You're just like, oh shit, somebody
They
else is
could
doing
mess
the
it up.
finishing. I don't think they will, but they absolutely could. Or they just might not be able to hide my flaws as well as I'm able to.
File to
There you
fit
go.
and paint to cover, Dad always said. All right, Sean, thanks a lot.
Yep, absolutely.
And I just want to say congratulations, Richard.
you.
And now that you've more than amply answered my
I don't feel like I
argument.
did.
What
I'm
is it?
sorry.
Well, you did. I think you didn't answer Mark's, but you certainly did mine.
Oh, okay.
Well, at least now I understand the position, which I couldn't get my head around before, but now it actually does make sense to me.
Okay.
So I'll have to come up with another objection.
Please do. Thank you so much. All right, guys. That's it for tonight. Thank you to all the guests. Your time of appearance when you came into the show will be in the description later. Thanks to everyone who showed up in the side chat. I appreciate you dropping by my little tiny corner of the YouTubes. Till next time, guys, I want you to know that I truly look forward to the day that we're all great friends.
Hooroo.